Chapter 32-24. I've always felt that the Yi Li Fei we know wouldn't be able to come up with such a meticulous plan to frame someone. There must be someone else behind him, but after so long, we still haven't found the existence of that military advisor. Do you think it has something to do with these two people? Gao Hanshun narrowed his eyes. Although the two people in front of him looked very young from the first time he saw them, he had a feeling in his heart that these two people were not simple. And this feeling had not dissipated until now when he met them again. Listening to Gao Hanshun's words, Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun's eyes couldn't help but become more serious. At that time, they were inexplicably tricked and fell into such a miserable situation. Until now, they still hadn't found the culprit, so one could imagine the unhappiness in their hearts. Are these two guys so powerful? Lu Jiangang was a little doubtful. Although they look good at their age, I'm afraid it's difficult for them to reach this step. What's more, the pill that controls people's hearts really has such an effect. We should be looking for an alchemist. What if they're alchemists? Gao Hanshun raised his eyebrows. If the two people in front of him had these two identities, then all of this could be linked together. Gue Jun frowned slightly, and his eyes flashed with a puzzled light. Big brother, I understand what you mean, but we don't have any grudges with these two people. Why would they treat us like this? Maybe they receive benefits from Yi Li Fei? Lu Jiangang said. Gue Jun shook his head. No, when they were sent to Yi Li Fei obviously didn't know them. What's more, with Yi Li Fei's character, it's impossible for him to trust two unfamiliar young people. I don't know about this either. Gao Hanshun's face showed a touch of helplessness, as if everything he had thought of before had been overturned by this point. What was the reason for the other party to treat them like this? If he couldn't think of this point, then all of this couldn't be linked together. Forget it, anyway. As long as I see these two guys, I feel uncomfortable. What bad luck. Lu Jiangang turned his head. As soon as he saw these two guys, he couldn't help but think of the situation of the heaven-shaking faction. So many years of hard work had gone to waste just like that. The blow to them was not an ordinary kind of big. Gue Jun shrugged. Since there are only two of them right now, it won't be too late to make a decision after we confirm whether or not they are disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate. If they aren't disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate, then it means that they are lying to us. We can ask them directly. Gao Hanshun nodded. That's right. These two young people don't have any power to resist us. Back then, they had let these two young people go. This time, they would not let them go. As long as they were tortured, they would definitely tell the truth. Then, they would be able to understand everything. While Gao Hanshun and company were conversing, Xiaonan had already brought another man over. Through the man's attire, Gao Hanshun and company could tell at a glance that he was a disciple of the Hundred Flowers Gate. Chapter 32-25. Xiaonan introduced with a smile. This is the disciple of the Hundred Flowers sect I told you about, LV Dong. I've heard so much about you. Nice to meet you. Only after the introductions did Xiaonan say to LV Dong, LV Dong, I called you over because I want you to confirm something for me. What is it? LV Dong raised an eyebrow. With our relationship, just tell me. I'll definitely tell you as long as I know. Xiaonan immediately smiled in satisfaction. Look at the two young people over there. Are they disciples of your Hundred Flowers sect? With that, Gao Hanshun, Gue Jun, and Gue Jun all looked at LV Dong. They were just too curious about the result. LV Dong looked in the direction Xiaonan was pointing at, and his gaze landed on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Afterwards, he shook his head. Those two? They shouldn't be disciples of our Hundred Flowers sect. I've never seen them before. There are many disciples of the Hundred Flowers sect. Although I can't say that I can recognize every single one of them. I've made it a rule that every disciple has to wear the sect's uniform when we go out this time to avoid conflicts between fellow disciples and being laughed at by others. The two of them aren't wearing it at all, so they can't be disciples of the Hundred Flowers sect. LV Dong looked away and looked at Xiaonan in confusion. What's wrong? Is there a problem with that? We've met them before. They said they were disciples of the Hundred Flowers sect. Does that mean they've been lying to us? Lu Jiangang asked. Gao Hanshun and Gue Jun's expressions changed immediately. They were not disciples of the Hundred Flower sect at all, which meant they had been lying to them the entire time. Just who were they? Why would they lie to them? Thinking up to there, Gao Hanshun's eyes could not help but become even more sinister. It seemed that the two young people really did have a secret. He had to get to the bottom of it all. He had a vague feeling that everything that happened on Emerald Island was very likely related to the two of them. However, after hearing Lu Jiangang's words, Lu Dong's eyes darkened. Someone actually dares to use the name of our Hundred Flowers Gate to swindle others? Xiao Anan was also surprised. These two youngsters are quite bold. Don't they know the consequences of pretending to be disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate? Let's go and take a look. I want to question them face to face and see how they can continue to pretend. Lu Dong's face was full of arrogance and disdain. He had always been proud of his identity as a disciple of the Hundred Flowers Gate, but these two fellows who came out of nowhere actually lied about their identities. He wanted to see how these two fellows would continue acting in front of him. Gao Hanshun and the others had been thinking about how to teach Bailey Hongzhuang and Lu Dong a lesson. When they heard that LV Dong was willing to take the lead, the three of them were overjoyed. Now that their statuses were different from before, they had to be more careful when doing things. However, as a disciple of the Hundred Flowers Gate, LV Dong didn't need to care at all. All right, let's go take a look. Xiaonan nodded and said to Gao Hanshun and the others, Brother Gao, let's go expose the two of them and recoup your losses. Chapter 32:26. LV Dong waved his hand. This is something that we disciples of the Hundred Flowers sect should do. I should thank you for reminding me of the existence of such a swindler. If I don't take this opportunity to punish them severely, they'll probably go even further in the future. Even though LV Dong was filled with righteous indignation, he only wanted to show off his ability in front of Xiaonan. They were just two people pretending to be disciples of the Hundred Flowers sect. Once the real master of the sect appeared, they would definitely piss their pants in fright and kowtow in apology. Master, I'm afraid we're in trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four studied the surroundings of the hall, waiting for the auction to begin. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's voice rang out in their ears. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but frown when she heard that voice. What is it? Gao Hanchuan's group has discovered us. They're walking towards us right now. They're definitely here to cause trouble, Xiao Hei said. With Xiao Hei's reminder, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four could not help but look in the direction that Xiao Hei was pointing at. Sure enough, Gao Hanchuan's group was walking towards them. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze landed on Gao Hanshun. Gao Hanshun did not avoid her gaze. Clearly, he was coming for Bailey Hongzhuang. Looks like we really are in trouble, Bailey Hongzhuang said indifferently. Enemies really are bound to meet on a narrow road. We met last time, but I never thought that we'd meet again in the auction house. We really can't avoid them. Shangguan Yingying's eyebrows revealed a deep displeasure. She was worried about the auction that was about to begin. She did not expect that Gao Hanshun would appear before the auction. It really ruined her mood. Di Beichen studied Gao Hanshun's group and said, they're stronger than us, and they've come in such a menacing manner as well. It won't be easy to deal with them. If it was in a remote place, it would be fine. However, there were people everywhere in the auction house. Once a conflict broke out, the impact would be huge. Moreover, they originally wanted to participate in the auction in a low-key manner and obtain the Tears of Glacial Flame. If they directly attracted the attention of so many people, it would be impossible for them to keep a low profile later. Since we're already here, there's nothing we can do. We can only take it one step at a time. Xiren sighed. Right now, they had no other choice but to deal with the situation as they saw fit. At this moment, Gao Hanchuan's group of 5 had already arrived in front of Bailey Hongzhuang's group. Gao Hanshun originally thought that only Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were together. He did not expect that when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying were also with them. It turned out that it was a team of 4 people, not 2. Thinking of this, Gao Hanshun only felt a thought emerge in his mind. Before he could figure out what was going on, The thought had already dissipated, and he couldn't recall it for a while. I never thought that we'd meet again, Doctor from the 100 Flowers Order. Gao Hanchuan's gaze was indifferent and cold. Thinking back to how arrogant Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying were in front of them, he wanted to see how these two would answer. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also knew that it was useless for them to pretend not to know each other. She immediately said, "Association Leader Gao, what a coincidence." Chapter 32:27. They were not unfamiliar with this attire. The alchemist from the 100 Flowers sect that Steward Qin had invited had the same symbol on their clothes. Clearly, they represented the 100 Flowers sect. Because of this, Bailey Hongzhuang did not directly answer Gao Hanchuan's question. If she continued to pretend to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect, she would undoubtedly be seen through. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not take the bait, Gao Hanchuan got straight to the point. "I just happen to have a doctor from the 100 Flowers sect here. Do you know him?" Lu Jiangang and the others all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang's answer. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart sank when she heard that. She understood Gao Hanchuan's intentions. It seemed that Gao Hanchuan had purposely brought a cultivator from the 100 Flowers sect to cause trouble. "I don't know him," Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. With that, LV Dong could not help but step forward. He said sternly, "Just who are you two? How dare you pretend to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect?" LV Dong's voice could be said to be very loud. In a short moment, it had already attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone had been waiting for the auction to begin. Now that they suddenly heard such a large commotion, they could not help but turn around to pay attention. When LV Dong noticed that he had attracted so many people's gazes, he did not feel embarrassed at all. On the contrary, he seemed extremely proud. As a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect, he had always attracted a lot of attention. At that moment, everyone could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichang with disdain. Pretending to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect was one thing, but now that they had been caught by the real deal, it was extremely humiliating. Di Beichang glanced at LV Dong indifferently and said, "Sir, when did we pretend to be disciples of the 100 Flowers sect? You can't just randomly throw dirty water at someone. Firstly, we didn't call ourselves disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate. Secondly, we didn't wear the uniform of the 100 Flowers Gate. Furthermore, we don't seem to have met each other before. For you to suddenly come up and give us such a big name, we really can't accept it." Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferent. Her gaze towards LV Dong was filled with confusion, as if she was looking at a lunatic. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, LV Dong couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He never thought that these two people would deny it, but under such circumstances, it was really hard to refute them. When Lu Jiangang and the others saw this, they couldn't help but say, "You said you were a disciple of the 100 Flowers Gate in front of us before. Are you going to deny it now? Do you have any evidence?" Di Beichun asked casually. They were clearly here to cause trouble, so they might as well deny it. As a result, there was nothing Gao Hanchuan and the others could do. Gao Hanchuan could not help but chuckle when he saw Di Beichun like this. "I really didn't think the two of you would change faces so quickly. You've really broadened my horizons. Gang Master Gao, we've only met once. I really don't understand why you've come to cause trouble for us. Just say what you want to say. There's no need to go out of your way to accuse us," Bailey Hongzhuang said coldly. Chapter 32:28. LV Dong stared coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other man. "But I'm warning you, if you dare to pretend to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers Gate on Penglai Island, you could lose your life at any time. Our 100 Flowers Gate's reputation cannot be slandered by people like you." In the beginning, he only thought that the two of them would quickly admit their mistakes after seeing him. He never thought that the two of them would act shamelessly, so he was a bit stunned. However, he quickly reacted. There were many cultivators in the world who wouldn't give up until they saw the coffin. Most of them wouldn't admit it unless they were caught in the act. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's expressions were complicated. They could only wonder where this idiot had come from. They originally only wanted to participate in this auction in a low-key manner. They never thought that they would attract everyone's attention. It was terrible. What are you trying to do? At this point, Di Baichen no longer played games with them. At the end of the day, even if Gao Han-shun was suspicious of them, it was only suspicion. Since you're not disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate, who are you? Gao Han-shun narrowed his eyes and glared sharply at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other man. The two of them had deceived them and colluded with Yi Li Fei. No one would believe that they didn't know the inside story. I don't think we need to explain things like this to you, Di Baichen said coldly. At this moment, LV Dong stepped forward. I'm giving you a chance to make up for your mistakes. If you don't tell me everything, don't blame me for being rude. Following LV Dong's words, Gao Hanchun's group of 5 looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 with unfriendly expressions. Clearly, they were ready to attack at any moment. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze gradually turned cold. It seemed that today's battle was unavoidable. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind Bailey Hongzhuang. LV Dong, what are you doing here? Lu Dong, who was originally arrogant, quickly restrained his arrogant expression after seeing the person who came. He said respectfully, Master Mo. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but turn her head to look at the person who had arrived. With this glance, her eyes could not help but flash with a trace of surprise because this person was none other than the alchemist she had met in the demon refining tower back then, Mo Xingyu. Mo Xingyu's gaze landed on Bailey Hongzhuang, and a smile quickly appeared on his face. Young Master D, I didn't expect to see you here. What a coincidence. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, Nice to meet you. Master Mo, hearing this, Mo Xingyu waved his hand and said, I don't have the right to call myself a master in front of you. You're the real master. As he spoke, Mo Xingyu couldn't help but glance between LV Dong and Bailey Hongzhuang. Not long after he entered the auction house, he noticed that everyone was looking in the same direction. He couldn't help but walk over to take a look. However, from the current situation, it seemed like there was a conflict between LV Dong and Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 32-29. When Lu Dong saw Mo Xingyu, he planned to complain to Mo Xingyu, but after hearing the conversation between Mo Xingyu and Bailey Hongzhuang, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He couldn't help but rub his eyes, wondering if he was dreaming. Mo Xingyu was a true alchemy master in the 100 Flowers sect. His alchemy skills were extremely powerful, and he had a very high status in the sect. First of all, he was just an ordinary disciple who had joined the 100 Flowers sect not long ago. Furthermore, he was only a doctor and not an alchemist. It could be seen that the difference between him and Mo Xingyu wasn't small. If it wasn't for the chance to talk to Mo Xingyu last time, Mo Xingyu probably wouldn't even know of his existence. However, Mo Xingyu was being so polite to this cultivator who was pretending to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect. He even said that the other party was a true master. Wasn't this a bit too shocking? Young Master D, is there a conflict between the two of you? Mo Xingyu slowly asked. Hearing Mo Xingyu's words, Lu Dong couldn't help but shiver. His expression quickly turned ugly. He really didn't expect that he was just teaching two unknown cultivators a lesson. How did this have anything to do with Mo Xingyu? Bailey Hongzhuang was a discerning person. Naturally, she knew that Mo Xingyu had appeared to help her solve the problem. Although it was a favor, she still accepted it. This young Master Lu that I've never met before has been clamoring for us to do so and so. Bailey Hongzhuang faintly smiled. Speaking of which, other than the last time I saw Master Mo, I've never seen a disciple of the 100 Flowers sect. I've always wanted to join the 100 Flowers Gate, but from the looks of it, they're not even on the same level. It's really surprising. Bailey Hongzhuang had never had a good impression of Lu Dong, a guy who deliberately bullied others just to let himself be in the limelight. Even if she was now using other people's hands, she had to teach Lu Dong a good lesson. It wasn't that easy to help Gao Han-shun and the others. If he wasn't careful, he could lose his life. It really wasn't worth it. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mo Xingyu's brows quickly furrowed. He turned to Lu Dong and said, Lu Dong, are you being disrespectful to young Master D? Master Mo, I only heard that young Master D was pretending to be a disciple of the Hundred Flowers sect. I'm carrying the responsibility of every disciple to remind him. Lu Dong looked troubled. He didn't want Master Mo to think that he was someone who was looking for trouble outside, so he could only tell him the reason. However, after hearing LV Dong's words, Mo Xingyu was even more speechless. What nonsense are you talking about? With young master status, why would he pretend to be a disciple? You to bees twos come up with such a ridiculous reason. Gao and the others, Gao and the others were, and the others, then the sea and the others was they and everyone. Never in their wildest dreams would they have expected such an outcome. It was simply too shocking. Lu Dong couldn't help but look at Gao Hanshun and the others. The anger in his eyes couldn't be more obvious. The other party was someone that Master Mo had repeatedly invited. No matter how he thought about it, he knew that there was no need for them to pretend. Chapter 32:30. Noticing LV Dong's gaze, Gao Hanshun and the other two were at a loss for words. They clearly remembered everything that had happened. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had clearly lied about being disciples of the Hundred Flowers Order in front of them. Furthermore, they could clearly remember their arrogant expressions and mannerisms. Yet, in such a short time, how did the situation completely change? Thinking of LV Dong's hatred towards them, they felt helpless. They never thought that not only would they not be able to teach Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson, they would even offend LV Dong. This was not a good thing for them. If it weren't for the fact that the identity of Master Mo in front of them was very unusual, they would have doubted whether this was a play put together by Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Xingyu in order to trick them. Xiaonan's expression was extremely ugly. He never thought that things would turn out this way. Although he had only heard about this matter from the beginning to the end from Gao Hanshun and the others, he was still the one who had found LV Dong. Now that LV Dong was in trouble, his friendship with LV Dong would inevitably be affected. It wasn't easy to befriend the disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate, and knowing LV Dong had saved him a lot of trouble. He didn't expect this to happen. It was unlikely that he would be able to ask LV Dong for help in the future. This was terrible. Thinking of this, Xiaonan could not help but blame Gao Hanshun and the other two. He did not know what was wrong with the three of them for them to slander each other. Xiaonan was not the only one who had such thoughts. Everyone present could not help but change their opinions. Previously, even though Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had not admitted it, everyone was still very disdainful because they did not believe it at all. As an alchemist of the Hundred Flowers Order, Mo Xingyu's status was extremely honorable and his reputation was even greater. Many people present knew him very well. Since these words had come from Mo Xingyu's mouth, there was no need to think to know that there was no problem. With Mo Xingyu's status, there was no need for him to lie for Bailey Hongzhuang. Furthermore, from Mo Xingyu's respectful attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang, this Bailey Hongzhuang was clearly an extraordinary person. Master Mo, I don't know either. LV Dong could not help but ask. He had finally managed to gain a foothold in the Hundred Flowers Order. If Mo Xingyu wanted to teach him a lesson, he only needed to go back and say a few words, and he would very likely be kicked out of the Hundred Flowers Order. This was not an outcome he could bear. Mo Xingyu's eyes darkened. Since you don't know, then what nonsense are you spouting? As a disciple of the Hundred Flowers Gate, your every word and action represents your identity as a member of the Hundred Flowers Gate. Don't you know that? Through your actions, how many people will misunderstand that our Hundred Flowers Gate is being unreasonable? Every time he heard Mo Xingyu's words, LV Dong's heart sank a little. He knew Mo Xingyu well. Normally, he rarely lectured people, but now, the more severe he was lecturing, the more important Bailey Hongzhuang was to him. Thinking up to here, LV Dong was simply about to die from regret. If he had known earlier, why would he have wanted to be in the limelight? At this moment, not only did he lose all his face, he might even lose his future. This was simply unlucky to the extreme. Chapter 32-31. Originally, they were afraid that they would have to fight, but who would have thought that Mo Xingyu's appearance would solve all the problems? Looking at LV Dong's regretful expression, they were extremely happy. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Bailey Hongzhuang. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang coincidentally knowing Mo Xingyu and Mo Xingyu admiring her, this situation wouldn't have happened. I was wrong this time. I won't do it again. LV Dong lowered his head, and his voice became softer and softer. Compared to his arrogant appearance before, it was a completely different attitude. If the crowd hadn't seen this change with their own eyes, they would have thought that they were two different people. At this moment, LV Dong only felt that his face was burning. He had never been so embarrassed in such a long time. The more arrogant he acted before, the more thoroughly he lost face now. It was really embarrassing to the extreme. However, Mo Xingyu didn't forgive LV Dong just because of his actions. Instead, he said, "The person you wronged is young Master D. If you want to apologize, apologize to young Master D. If young Master D forgives you, then this matter is over. If young Master D doesn't forgive you, then be prepared to be punished when you return to the 100 Flowers sect." As Mo Xingyu's voice fell, LV Dong couldn't help but raise his head. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes, and at the same time, his face had become extremely ugly. When he noticed Mo Xingyu's serious expression, LV Dong knew that everything Mo Xingyu said was true. If he couldn't calm Bailey Hongzhuang today, then his days after returning to the 100 Flowers sect would be very difficult. Even if his heart was unwilling, Lu Dong could only apologize to Bailey Hongzhuang at this moment. After all, this was related to his own future. Young Master D, I was blind before. I must have made a mistake and wronged you. I hope you won't hold a grudge against me and forgive me this time. LV Dong bowed deeply to Bailey Hongzhuang. His attitude was extremely sincere. Now that things had reached this point, lowering his head was inevitable. He might as well show it more thoroughly. He had offended someone he shouldn't have, but at least he had a chance to make up for it. At this moment, LV Dong was no longer dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang. After all, it was meaningless for the weak to be dissatisfied with the strong. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang did not find trouble with him in the future, he would be thankful. Mo Xingyu's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang as he said, "Young Master D, it's up to you to decide how to deal with this matter." Gao Hanshun and the others felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles after seeing this scene. They had no idea what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang was. Could it be that they had recognized the wrong person? Back then, those two fellows only looked ordinary. If they really had such status and identity, then there was no need to hide at all. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "Master Mo, since this is a misunderstanding, it's fine as long as it's resolved. LV Dong, did you hear that? Young Master D has forgiven you. You can't make such a mistake again in the future." LV Dong nodded repeatedly. His voice was filled with excitement, and he felt his entire body relax. Chapter 32-32. At this point, LV Dong could not help but turn his head to look at Gao Hanshun and the other two. The hatred in his eyes could not be more obvious. If he did not listen to their slanderous words, why would he take the initiative to look for trouble with Bailey Hongzhuang? This was an undeserved disaster. Noticing LV Dong's resentful gaze, Gao Hanshun and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. The development of the situation was beyond their expectations. They did not intend to trick LV Dong. However, it was obvious that no matter how they explained to LV Dong, it was useless. LV Dong would not believe them at all. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head faintly, her eyes moving away from Lu Dong's body. She did not intend to say anything more. "Young Master D, did you come to Penglai Island to participate in the auction?" Seeing that the matter had been settled, Mo Xingyu did not have the mood to pay attention to LV Dong. Instead, he focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and smiled faintly. The Golden Flame auction this time has such a big impact. We have never been to Penglai Island before. Coincidentally, we had the opportunity to take a look, so we came together. I see. Mo Xingyu smiled faintly. I wonder how young Master D has been in the Demon Tower recently? Do you have any plans to leave? We are currently in the Demon Tower for the arena competition. This time, we came to the auction to see if there are any treasures that can increase our strength. We will not leave for the time being, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not plan to leave the Demon Tower for the time being, Mo Xingyu was a little disappointed. However, his face was still brimming with a smile. The training in the Demon Tower is not something that can be completed in a short period of time. It will take a lot of time. I hope that young Master D can successfully obtain the Demon Tower's inheritance. When that time comes, you will really amaze the world. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and waved her hand. Master Mo really thinks too highly of me. Although I have such thoughts, I know that it is not so easy to do. However, it is also good to use this opportunity to increase my cultivation. Young Master D, don't forget to visit our 100 Flowers Island when you have the chance. Contact me in advance when the time comes. As the host, I will definitely accompany you. Of course, of course. Bailey Hongzhuang cupped his hands and smiled. After LV Dong left, Xiao Nan, Gao Han Shun, and the others also retreated a little, standing not far from Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. At this distance, they could clearly hear the conversation between Mo Xingyu and Bailey Hongzhuang. However, the more they heard, the more shocked they were. Brother Gao, I think you've got the wrong person. How could such a person pretend to be a disciple of the 100 Flowers Gate? Xiao Nan's eyes were filled with displeasure. He never thought that Gao Hanshun would do such an unreliable thing. Originally, he only wanted to show off his connections. He never thought that he would completely offend LV Dong. When he thought of LV Dong's gloomy face, he did not even have the courage to go over and apologize. Gao Hanshun could naturally hear the displeasure in Xiao Nan's words. He could not help but say, "Big brother Xiao, I know you won't believe me, but this matter has indeed happened before. As for why it has become like this now, I don't know either." Chapter 32-33. Forget it. So what if these two really claim to be disciples of the 100 Flowers sect? There's no point in saying that now. Xiaonan waved his hand, clearly not intending to listen to Gao Hanshun and the other two's explanation. I'll go look for LV Dong first. I hope he'll calm down. This time, he's really in trouble. Brother Xiao, why don't we go and apologize together? This is really beyond our expectations. We're really sorry to LV Dong. Gue Jun could not help but say. However, Xiao Anan shook his head. He's in a fit of anger now. I'm afraid I won't be in a good mood if I go. If you guys go, I'm afraid he won't be able to hold back his anger. Let's just stay here for now. After Xiao Nan left, Gao Hanshun and the other two looked at each other, their expressions extremely ugly. I remember that these two guys were the ones we met back then. It's only been half a year since we last met. How did they become so unfathomable? Gue Jun's face was filled with confusion. He could not figure out where the problem came from. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had a great opportunity in the past half a year? I'm not sure. I just don't understand. If these two guys are really so capable, why did they lie to us back then? Aren't they just looking for trouble? Lu Jiangang shook his head. He simply couldn't wrap his head around the events that had just transpired. Gao Hanchuan's gaze gradually deepened. His sharp gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. If his suspicions about Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were not deep enough before, now he increasingly felt that these two were not simple. There must be something he had overlooked. According to Master Mo, this young Master D should be an alchemist? Gao Hanshun suddenly asked. Hearing that, Gue Jun and Lu Jiangang both nodded. That's right. We've never understood who refined the pill that could control people's hearts. There's no such expert on Emerald Island, and Yi Li Fei doesn't have the ability to refine such a pill. If this young Master D is a very powerful alchemist master, then all these problems can be connected, right? Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this. This idea was really a little shocking, but it just so happened that everything could be linked together. Big brother, do you mean that the medicinal pills were given to Yi Li Fei by these two fellows? Not bad. Gao Hanchuan's gaze gradually sharpened. Although I don't have any evidence, I feel that this matter is most likely true. So, in this way, the reason we've fallen into such a state is the result of these fellows working together with Yi Li Fei. Lu Jiangang's voice rose slightly, and it was filled with shock and disbelief. Gao Hanchun nodded. Haven't we always wondered why Yi Li Fei, who was obviously poisoned and beyond cure, is still alive and well? It seems like he hasn't been affected at all. Ordinary doctors of the Hundred Flowers Gate are unable to treat the illness, but in the hands of young Master D, that may not necessarily be the case. In a short period of time, Gao Hanchun had already connected all these together. All the places that he didn't understand were now all clear. Chapter 32-34. After chatting with Bailey Hongzhuang for a while, Mo Xingyu left as well. He had brought the other disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate with him this time, as he still had some matters to attend to. Speaking of which, that LV Dong is really unlucky. Mo Xingyu just happened to be here, and he got scolded so badly. Shangguan Yingying could not help but chuckle. The feeling of being arrogant and suddenly finding out that he had kicked an iron plate was probably not good. Di Beichen's expression was calm, but his eyes that were as deep as the sea revealed a hint of seriousness. Gao Hanchun and the others have already placed their attention on us. I'm afraid that they will keep an eye on us after the auction ends. It might be troublesome when we leave the Golden Flame auction house later. Hearing Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang also nodded. I'm afraid that these guys will be waiting outside the auction house for us to leave. They should be holding a grudge against us for what happened on Emerald Island back then. So, they want to take revenge when they see us. From what I can see, they're now in contact with the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect and the disciples of the Hundred Flowers Gate. From the looks of it, they should be doing quite well. Why are they still so concerned about what happened back then? Xiren raised his eyebrows. Although he had always hoped that Gao Hanchuan's life would get worse and worse from the current situation, although the heaven-shaking faction had retreated from Emerald Island, it seemed that they were still doing well. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. In my opinion, the situation shouldn't be like that, Di Beichun suddenly said. For a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's gazes fell on Di Beichun. They did not know what Di Beichun's judgment was. If they are really doing well during this period of time, they shouldn't be begging the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect. When we saw them in the restaurant a few days ago, Gao Hanchun was clearly very respectful to the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect. Logically speaking, although the heaven-shaking faction cannot be compared to the Crimson Moon sect, one is an ordinary disciple of the Crimson Moon sect, and the other is the leader of the heaven-shaking faction. Obviously, the leader of the heaven-shaking faction has a higher status. What if that person wasn't an ordinary disciple of the Crimson Moon sect? If he wasn't, then he wouldn't have stood there silently when Mo Xingyu was talking, Di Beichen replied. As Di Beichen's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two immediately understood. They had not thought of this possibility before, but now it seemed that Gao Hanchun and the other two were in a very bad situation. Beichun, do you think it's because their heaven-shaking faction can no longer survive, so they came to seek refuge with the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect? Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Di Beichen's eyes flashed as he pondered. It's possible, but I can't be sure. If that's really the case, that would be great. Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. These guys are so despicable. If the Shocking Heavens faction fails, they won't be able to accept this blow. Let's go back and ask someone to find out. Bailey Hongzhuang said. Not long after, the auction was finally about to begin. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three immediately walked towards the entrance of the auction hall. At the same time, Di Beichun and Wen Xiren took out their invitation letters. Chapter 32-35. As Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four lined up, Gao Hanchuan's group of 3 followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang's group. Gao Hanchuan's group did not avoid the gazes of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. Clearly, they already hated Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. Now, they had nothing to lose. In any case, they were not worried that Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 could do anything to them. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 did not say anything about this. They just pretended not to see anything. To them, obtaining the tears of frigid fire was the most important thing. They were not in the mood to argue with Gao Hanchuan's group. Xiaonan returned to Gao Hanchuan's group after speaking with LV Dong for a while. Seeing this, Lu Jiangang could not help but ask, "Brother Xiao, how is LV Dong?" Xiaonan shook his head. He's still angry. No matter what I say, he won't listen. We can only think of a way to make up for it in the future. Xiaonan was also very helpless about this. If he had known this would happen, he would not have called LV Dong. He did not expect to cause so much trouble. If he wanted to mend this relationship, he would have to pay a hefty price. "Brother Xiao, we've implicated you this time. We're really sorry." Gao Hanchuan's face was filled with guilt. Speaking of which, this matter was completely between them and Bailey Hongzhuang. He was really apologetic for dragging Xiaonan and LV Dong into this. Xiaonan, who was originally very unhappy, looked much better after seeing Gao Hanchuan's sincere apology. "Forget it. Since it's already like this, I know you guys don't want it to be like this." Although Xiaonan's heart ached for his loss, since it was already like this, if he became unhappy with Gao Hanchuan's group because of this matter, his loss would be even greater. Although Gao Hanchun and Xiaonan's voices were very soft, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 still heard it. They could not help but be even more certain of Di Beichen's judgment. When they first met Gao Hanchun was not an ordinary arrogant person. Why would he apologize to someone like this? At this moment, a woman with a smile on her face said to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, "Young master, please show us your invitation letter." Hearing this, Di Beichen and Ziren immediately took out their invitations. After checking Di Beichen and Wen Ziren's invitation letters, the woman nodded and said to the woman who was taking notes, "Number 52 and number 53. However, when Gao Hanchun heard the number of invitations mentioned by the woman, his pupils widened in an instant, and his face was filled with shock. His eyes were locked on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. At this moment, his eyes turned red due to congested blood. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with a gaze that seemed to be filled with deep hatred. Lu Jiangang and the others noticed a change in Gao Hanchuan's expression, and their expressions could not help but change. A hint of panic appeared on their faces. "Big brother, what's wrong with you?" However, Gao Hanchun did not seem to hear Lu Jiangang's words at all. His hands were tightly clenched into fists, and the veins on his temples bulged. He looked like an enraged lion and was extremely terrifying. "Number 52 and number 53. That's the invitation letter I sent to my younger brother." After hearing the number on the invitation, Gao Hanchun connected all the dots in an instant. Chapter 32-36. Now, he finally understood that the murderers of his 2 younger brothers were the 4 people in front of him. Why did these 4 people treat the Jintian faction like this? The root cause was here. The murderers that he had always wanted to find were actually right in front of him. As Gao Hanchuan's voice fell, Lu Jiangang, Gue Jun, and Xiaonan could not help but be stunned. After they reacted, they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, and the look in their eyes suddenly changed. "They are the murderers." Gue Jun's face was filled with disbelief. Although he had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was very likely to be Yi Li Fei's advisor behind the scenes, he had never thought that they would be the murderers of Gao Hanchuan's younger brothers. If this was really the case, didn't it mean that they had already found the murderers on Emerald Island, but because they did not recognize them, they could only watch the murderers slip away in front of their eyes? Lu Jiangang's expression was also extremely complicated. Their Jintian faction had developed from such a prosperous situation to such a destitute state. He had never thought that the culprit would be the murderers of Gao Hanchuan's 2 younger brothers. then these guys had simply ruined everything for them. Although Xiao Nan was not clear about the process, he had only heard about it for Gao Hanshun and the other two. However, he did not expect that the murderers would appear in front of them so easily. Gao Hanshun stared at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He had already determined this result in his heart because he had given these 2 invitation letters to his 2 younger brothers. His 2 younger brothers had been killed before they arrived at Penglai Island, and the things on them must have been taken away by the murderers. Now that these 2 invitation letters had appeared here, the reason was self-evident. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 obviously did not expect that Gao Hanshun would recognize the number on the invitation letter and directly determine their identity through the number. They could not help but curse in their hearts. This Gao Hanshun is too shrewd. He even remembers the number on the invitation letter clearly. I'm afraid it's impossible for us to continue hiding. Shang Guanying's face was a little ugly. They had been hiding this very well. She didn't expect that their identity would be exposed because of an invitation. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were also surprised. They had never noticed that the invitation letter had a serial number. They didn't expect that this would become their biggest flaw. In this way, no matter how they tried to defend themselves, it was useless. Gao Hanshun had already determined that they were the murderers. "You 4 damned bastards! How dare you kill my brother?" Gao Hanshun strode forward and grabbed Di Beichen's collar with one hand. He had never hated anyone so much. It was because of these guys in front of him that he had fallen from his high spirits to his current state. His brother had died in the hands of these 4 guys. Di Beichen directly slapped Gao Hanshun's hand away. His handsome face was cold. If they didn't have evil intentions towards us, why would we send them on their way? Speaking of which, gang leader Gao's 2 brothers really have the same temperament as you. They are both so arrogant that it's annoying. Chapter 32-37. Seeing that Di Beichen had admitted it himself, Gao Hanshun was even more furious. For such a long time, he had been in extreme pain because he had not been able to find Gao Hanxiu and Gao Hanxia's murderers. His younger brother had been killed, and he had seen the faces of those who had killed his younger brother with his own eyes. However, after such a long time, he still had not been able to find the murderers and avenge his younger brother. He had thought that with the power of the Jintian Association, it would be a simple matter to find the 4 cultivators who had just arrived on Penglai Island. However, the final result was a vicious slap to his face. However, he had never thought that the murderers had already appeared in front of him, and he had missed them just like that. Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun also glared at Di Beichen's group of 4. At this moment, they finally understood why Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 would help Yi Li Fei to treat them like this even though they had no enmity with each other. It turned out that they had already formed a grudge against them long ago. However, at the same time, they also felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 were extremely terrifying. They were just cultivators who had just arrived on Penglai Island. According to common sense, they should have no power to resist at all and could only be captured without putting up a fight. However, not only had they slipped away before their eyes, they had even completely destroyed the Jintian Association. This kind of ability was really shocking. A complicated light flashed in Xiao Nan's eyes. He had heard about Gao Hanshun's younger brother's murder earlier, but after the news had spread, he had only thought that it was a pretense used by Gao Hanshun to expand his power. Now, it seemed that it was real and not just a pretense. "You killed my younger brother. I said that I would definitely take your lives." Gao Hanshun narrowed his eyes, and a strong, murderous intent shot out from his eyes. He wanted nothing more than to tear Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 into 1,000 pieces. Facing Gao Hanshun's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 remained calm. Now that things had come to this, they were no longer the same as when they had first arrived at Penglai Island. Even if Gao Hanshun and the others were stronger than them, they could not only run away. They had been unwilling to reveal their identities because they felt that their current strength was not enough to completely defeat Gao Hanshun and the others. If they were strong enough, then there was no need for Gao Hanshun to come find them. They would have already taken Gao Hanshun's life. At this moment, Gao Hanshun didn't want to say anything. His enemies were right in front of him. He just wanted to chop off their heads right now. Vigorous elemental energy exploded from within Gao Hanshun's body. Without any hesitation, it directly attacked Di Beichun in front of him. He wanted to kill these guys to avenge his brothers. The sudden presence of essence energy instantly attracted the attention of all the cultivators present. Everyone's gaze locked onto Gao Hanshun. Everyone was speechless when they saw that it was Gao Hanshun who took the initiative to attack again. Why does this guy keep going on and on? I think he was the one who pinned the crime on young Master D. This guy must have failed to use the 100 Flowers Gates cultivators to deal with young Master D. Now, he can't help but look for trouble himself. Chapter 32-38. All the cultivators present were filled with disgust and impatience towards Gao Hanshun. They felt that this fellow had purposely picked a place where so many people were gathered to cause trouble again and again. He was simply trying to please the crowd with claptrap. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had been smeared with dirty water before Master Mo proved that she was indeed a powerful person. On the contrary, everyone had a better impression of her. Those who were truly powerful were so low-key. Instead, it was a bunch of clowns who kept looking for trouble. It was truly a little speechless. Isn't this person the sect leader of the Heaven-Shaking Association, Gao Hanshun? After Gao Hanshun had attracted the attention of the crowd time and time again, many people recognized his identity. I heard that the Heaven-Shaking Association can no longer survive and is on the verge of disbanding. Instead of thinking about how to maintain the Heaven-Shaking Association, he keeps looking for trouble here. What is he trying to do? The Heaven-Shaking Association can no longer be maintained. Most of the members have already left. What's left is just an empty shell. I heard that Gao Hanshun has already found a way out. Look, aren't those beside him the disciples of the Crimson Moon sect? I think they want to join the Crimson Moon sect. There were many smart people present. Although Penglai Island was very big, the incident caused by the Heaven-Shaking Association had attracted too much attention. Therefore, everyone knew quite a bit about it. When the Heaven-Shaking Association was developing very well, they were extremely arrogant. Now that they were gradually declining, naturally, many people were waiting to see them make a fool of themselves. When Xiaonan saw that the crowd had dragged him into the discussion about Gao Hanshun, his face instantly turned a little ugly. He had indeed intended to recommend Gao Hanshun and the others to the Crimson Moon sect because Gao Hanshun and the other two had promised him many benefits. Although Gao Hanshun and the other two's reputation was not very good, he believed that it would not be a problem for them to become ordinary disciples of the Crimson Moon sect. However, now that the crowd had revealed his relationship with Gao Hanshun and the other two, he felt that he had lost face. After all, it was Gao Hanshun's and the others' business to be ridiculed for reaching this point. It was not appropriate for him to be implicated. When Gao Hanshun made his move, a cold glint flashed across Di Beichun's eyes. Their original intention was to participate in this auction to obtain the tears of frigid heat. They never imagined that Gao Hanshun would repeatedly disrupt their plans. One could imagine the unhappiness in their hearts. However, just as Gao Hanshun was about to make a move, a man blocked Gao Hanshun's hand. Gao Hanshun's expression immediately turned ugly when the opponent easily dispelled his attack that was supposed to be a sure win move. However, when Gao Hanshun saw the person's real appearance, he could not help but be shocked. This was because the cultivator in front of him was none other than the person in charge of the Golden Flame Auction House, Manager Jean. Syndicate Leader Gao, I don't care what kind of deep grudge you have with the other party. However, if you dare to make a move in my Golden Flame Auction House, I have no choice but to interfere. Manager Jin's round face was filled with a faint smile. However, his words were filled with warning. It's not the first time you've come to our auction house. You can't have forgotten our auction house's rules completely, right? Chapter 32-39. Fights were not allowed in the Golden Flame auction house. This was a rule that everyone was well aware of. It was said that there was once a person who thought highly of himself and ignored this rule of the Golden Flame auction house. In the end, a cultivator from the Golden Flame auction house broke his leg and threw him out. The person kept clamoring for revenge, but there was no news of him in the end. Ever since that incident, no one dared to challenge the rules of the Golden Flame auction house because they could not bear the consequences. Gao Hanshun knew very well that his identity could not be compared to the cultivator from the Golden Flame auction house who had provoked him back then. Given the methods of the Golden Flame auction house, it was undoubtedly easy for them to take his life. Previously, he was just in a fit of anger and had forgotten where he was. It was extremely embarrassing. Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun's faces turned ugly in an instant. They knew very well that nothing good would come out of offending the Golden Flame auction house. Xiao Henan had already taken a few steps back the moment Steward Jean appeared. Obviously, he did not want to have anything to do with Gao Hanshun and the other two. Because of these three guys, he first offended LV Dong and Master Mo, and then he was mocked by everyone. He realized that these three guys were simply trouble wherever they went. If he offended Steward Jean of the Golden Flame auction house, because of this, it would not be worth it. At this moment, Xiaonan had secretly made up his mind. He no longer expected any benefits from Gao Hanshun and the other two. No matter how many benefits there were, they could not be more troublesome than the three of them. At the same time, the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also fell on Manager Jin's body. His round and fat body, his round face, it was as if he was very oily on a daily basis. However, it would be the biggest mistake to ignore Steward Jean because of this. Steward Jean had easily taken Gao Hanshun's attack just now, which already proved his strength. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. Previously, Gao Hanshun could not see the situation clearly and only wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, after Steward Jean appeared, he no longer had such thoughts. Steward Jean, I was too impulsive just now. I didn't mean to break the rules of the auction house. Gao Hanshun hurriedly apologized. Seeing Gao Hanshun immediately change his attitude, the smile in Steward Jin's eyes deepened. He said, Our Golden Flame auction house has always been a business. It's undoubtedly great that Master Gao can think things through. As he said that, Steward Jean could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Hearing Steward Jin's answer, Gao Hanshun and the others could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, when they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, the resentment in their eyes became even more intense. They really did not expect these guys to be so lucky. Every time, they would be able to avoid it so coincidentally. Instead, it was them who got into trouble. Chapter 3240. Originally, whether it was LV Dong looking for trouble or Gao Hanshun discovering that they were the murderers of Gao Hanxia and Gao Hanxia, it should have been a big problem. Just by standing in the Golden Flame auction house, they didn't even need to do anything. Someone had already come to help them solve this problem. From beginning to end, they just stood there without moving. Instead, it was LV Dong and Gao Hanshun who were completely disgraced. Di Beichen quietly sized up Steward Jean. Just now, he didn't ignore Steward Jin's gaze when he looked at them. Earlier, he already felt that it was impossible for Steward Jean to not come looking for them. After noticing Steward Jin's meaningful gaze, he understood that Steward Jean had probably noticed them long ago. It was just that he hadn't come looking for them. At this moment, a figure appeared beside Steward Jean. After seeing Di Beichen, a look of surprise appeared on the other party's face. He couldn't help but say, Little brother, I didn't expect us to meet again. What a coincidence. Hearing this, Di Beichen turned his head and immediately recognized that this was Di Yujue, whom he had invited to drink a few days ago. Immediately, a joyful smile appeared on Di Beichen's face. Yes, what a coincidence. The moment Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun saw Di Yujue, their faces became abnormally pale. They still couldn't forget that death-like gaze. At this moment, when they saw Di Yujue, it was as if they had fallen into an endless abyss. This person was like a death god in their hearts. If possible, they only hoped that they would never see him again in their lives. They didn't expect to meet him again in just a few days. Most importantly, this person seemed to be very familiar with Di Beichen. Gao Hanchun originally didn't know about Di Yujue's situation, but after Xiaonan left that day, Lu Jiangang and the other two had already told him about the specific situation, and he was also very afraid in his heart. However, he couldn't understand. Whether it was Mo Xingyu or this extremely terrifying Di Yujue in front of him, they were not simple people. How did they become friends with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others who had just arrived at Penglai Island for less than half a year? Birds of a feather flock together. This is a rule that applies everywhere. Logically speaking, if he didn't have enough ability, he wouldn't be able to get such a cultivator to befriend him. However, the scene before him really made him feel a little stunned. When Manager Jean saw that Di Yujue actually knew Di Beichun, his fat face couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. "Young master, you know them?" Di Yujue smiled faintly and nodded. "They're my friends." As soon as these words came out, Manager Jin's face suddenly revealed a deep shock. With Di Yujue's noble status, he rarely had the chance to see Di Yujue. Furthermore, he had never heard Di Yujue say that anyone was his friend. Di Beichun and the others had just arrived at Penglai Island. Logically speaking, they shouldn't have had the chance to meet Di Yujue. How did they become friends with Di Yujue in the blink of an eye? However, Gao Hanchun and the others were completely dumbfounded when they heard how Manager Jin addressed Di Yujue. With Manager Jin's status, he actually addressed Di Yujue as young master. Doesn't this mean that Di Yujue's status in the Golden Flame auction house is higher? Chapter 3241. Xiaonan immediately recognized Di Yujue. He really did not expect that the cultivator they casually drove away that day would have such a strong background. As long as Di Yujue opened his mouth, their lives would be in danger. Thinking of this, more and more cold sweat appeared on Xiaonan's forehead. Fortunately, Di Yujue did not get angry that day. Otherwise, he would really be done for. Now, he only hoped that Di Yujue did not notice his existence at that time. After all, he was not the one who drove Di Yujue away. At this moment, Xiaonan no longer hesitated. He turned around and walked directly to the back of the group. He was no longer willing to have anything to do with Gao Hanchun and the other two. Wasn't this causing trouble for himself? "Manager Jean, since my friends are here, you can bring them to the box," Di Yujue said lightly. Hearing this, Manager Jean nodded repeatedly. Yes. Di Yujue then turned to look at Di Beichun and the others, saying, "The environment in the box is much more comfortable than the ordinary seats. The bidding service there will also be better. I still have some things to do, so I can't accompany you. Let's meet again next time, okay?" Di Beichun nodded. "Thank you. Since you're here at the Golden Flame auction house, as the host, it's natural for me to take good care of my friends," Di Yujue said with a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were filled with admiration for Di Beichun. When he first met Di Beichun did not know his identity at all. Just now, when he revealed his identity, he clearly noticed a flash of surprise in Di Beichun's eyes. However, he only saw admiration and understanding in Di Beichun's eyes and did not see any flattery. This already made him have a good impression of him. "Manager Jean, take good care of them. I'll take my leave first." Yes. After Di Yujue left, the way everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three changed. If it was said that Mo Xingyu's previous words had already raised everyone's opinion of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, then Di Yujue's appearance had already caused everyone to categorize the four of them as people that should not be provoked. As long as it was a cultivator who had some relationship with the Golden Flame auction house, no one would be willing to offend them. Not to mention that the person Bailey Hongzhuang and the others knew was very likely to be the young master of the Golden Flame auction house. Immediately, everyone looked at the ashen-faced Gao Hanchun and the others with eyes full of mockery. Previously, he had already felt that these fellows were playing to the gallery. Now they were slapping him in the face one after another. This was no longer a slap in the face, but a death wish. Under Manager Jin's lead, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three directly arrived at the private room of the Golden Flame auction house. As everyone knew, those who were able to participate in the auction in the private rooms were usually wealthy and respectable people. The private rooms of the Golden Flame auction house were a place to show off one's status. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter at all. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three entered the private room, they immediately realized that the Golden Flame auction house's magnificence and decorations were not something that ordinary people could compare to. The entire private room was mainly black, inlaid with a faint gold color. It was low-key yet gorgeous, respectable yet not ostentatious. The four sides of the room were filled with high-quality soft cushions, making it exceptionally comfortable to sit in. The most important thing was that they could clearly see the auction items on the stage, which was far better than an ordinary seat. Chapter 3242. Hearing Steward Jin's words, Di Beichen shook his head and said, "This place is already very good. We are very satisfied." The smile on Steward Jin's face deepened. "You are all friends of our young master. Young master has especially instructed me to treat you well. No matter what you need, you could directly ask me. If I am not here, you can also ask the waiter. We will definitely arrange it properly. Steward Jin is too polite. Everything is fine with us. There is no need to make any more arrangements," Di Beichen said with a faint smile. Steward Jin nodded and waved his hand. The waiter outside the door had already brought in all kinds of snacks and drinks. "Then please rest here for a while. The auction will start soon. I still have some things to tell you. If you need anything, just inform the waiter outside the door. She will contact me. Steward Jin, just do your thing. Everything is fine here." After Steward Jin left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three people looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. The service of the Golden Flame auction house is really thoughtful. The auction houses we went to before can't be compared with this one. Shangguan Yingying sighed. This service and this attitude really made them feel like VIPs. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. "We are sitting in this box and can see the situation on the auction stage very clearly. It should have been processed by special means. It feels as if the stand is right in front of us. I heard that ordinary people can't enter the box of the Golden Flame auction house. Usually, only the higher-ups of the other three forces can enter the box. I didn't expect that we would also receive such treatment. I'm afraid no one would believe me if I told them." Xiren chuckled. "Di Beichen, your ability is also amazing. A person you met casually has such a great background. Logically speaking, a person of such status shouldn't have made friends with someone he met by chance. It seems like you two are not just fated to meet." Di Beichen looked calm. "I just felt a very special feeling when I saw him. Even today, I still feel the same. I don't care about his identity. Compared to that, he hoped that he could find the source of this special feeling. Beichen, Duju's status in the Golden Flame auction house is not simple. If we can't get the tears of Frigid Flame back, will there be a glimmer of hope for us to ask him?" Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen with her pitch-black phoenix eyes twinkling. Previously, they had been thinking about how to negotiate with the higher-ups of the Golden Flame auction house. Steward Jin had made it clear that Steward Jin seemed unable to make a decision on this matter. But Duju's status was higher than Steward Jin's, so maybe there was hope. This way, maybe Beichen's problem. And Jin. This way, maybe Beichen's S. Let's take a look at the situation of this auction first. Di Beichen said slowly. He always felt that his friendship with Duju was very pure. If possible, he didn't want to destroy it because of other things. Chapter 3243. As Gaohan Shun and the other two entered the ordinary seats of the auction, they realized that Xiao Nan, who had been following behind them, was nowhere to be found. Previously, all of their attention had been focused on Duju and Di Beichen. They had not noticed the situation behind them at all. Why has Big Brother Xiao disappeared? Could it be that we got separated when we entered? Lu Jiangang furrowed his brows as a puzzled look appeared on his face. However, Gao Hanshun and Gue Jun's expressions have turned extremely ugly. They were not as simple as Lu Jiangang had thought. They knew very well that Xiao Nen had probably decided to draw a clear line between them after what had just happened. Hence, he had immediately separated from them. Big Brother, Xiao Nen has left just like that. Doesn't that mean that our plan to join the Crimson Moon sect? Gue Jun stared at Gao Hanshun with an ugly look on his face. This was truly a case of one trouble after another. It had not been easy for them to obtain confirmation from Xiao Nan. As long as they could join the Crimson Moon sect, their current predicament would at least be resolved. However, with this commotion, would they not be back to where they started? Even the possibility of joining the Crimson Moon sect was gone. Gao Hanshun clenched his fist tightly. At this moment, he could no longer care about any of this. He only wanted to tear Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three into 1,000 pieces. Only then would he be able to quell the rage in his heart. If it had not been for these fellows, he would not have ended up in this state. Gue Jun, Jiangang, I've dragged you down this time. Gao Hanshun sighed as his face filled with guilt. If it had not been for me, you would not have ended up in this state. Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun could not help but shake their heads when they heard Gao Hanshun's words. They said, Big Brother, when we first became sworn brothers, we had already sworn that we would share blessings and hardships. Your matters are our matters. How can you say that you've dragged us down? It's fine if we can't join the Crimson Moon sect. The entire Penglai Island is so big. I don't believe that there won't be a place for the three of us. Gao Hanshun patted Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun's shoulders as his face filled with gratitude. Good brothers. Big Brother, in my opinion, those 4 people aren't simple. If we want to take revenge, I'm afraid we'll have to think about it carefully. Gue Jun glanced at Gao Hanshun. He could not be more clear about the latter's thoughts. However, based on the current situation, it would not be easy to take revenge immediately. Gao Hanshun nodded. I understand what you mean. I've already calmed down. No matter what, I must take revenge. But we can discuss this plan first. It's good that you understand. Gue Jun heaved a sigh of relief. What he was most afraid of was that Gao Hanshun would be hot-headed and directly rush up to attack. Who knew if the other party had some tricks up his sleeve? If that were to happen, they would be doomed. Gao Hanshun must be thinking about how to deal with us now. In my opinion, we have to be careful after this auction. Xiren's face darkened slightly, and a serious look flashed in his eyes. Beichen nodded. But I'm afraid that what happened just now has given them some scruples. I'm afraid they won't dare to act rashly for the time being. We have to find a way to solve this problem. Chapter 32:44. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a low voice. Because her cultivation was not as good as Gao Hanshun and the others, she could only make a rough judgment based on the aura, but she believed that the gap should not be too big. With their current strength, it was indeed not an easy task to deal with someone with such a cultivation base. Even if they had broken through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm, they could still fight against cultivators of the 6th level of the Purple Realm and even the 7th level of the Purple Realm. However, if they were to face Gao Hanshun, who was at the 8th level of the Purple Realm, it would not be so simple. After all, at this level of cultivation, every increase in strength would bring an extremely shocking increase in combat strength. If we were to fight them head-on, we would be at a disadvantage. However, judging from the current situation of the Jintian Association, I'm afraid that the 3 of them will not be able to find any other helpers. It is not impossible for us to fight them together. Beichen said slowly in a low voice. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with thoughts. That's right. Even if we were to fight them head-on, we still have a chance. In that case, we might as well put this matter to the back of our mind for the time being. After the auction is over, we will think about how to deal with them. Xiren looked carefree. What he was most concerned about now was Beichen's change in physique. Gao Hanshun and the others were no longer the same as before. so there was no need to be as wary as before. Soon, the auction of the Golden Flame auction house began under the expectant gaze of the crowd. A graceful woman walked up to the ring. Her outstanding face and enchanting figure attracted the attention of the crowd in an instant. However, there was no coquettishness on this woman's face. On the contrary, it was filled with nobility and confidence. "I am the auctioneer of today's auction, Enya." Enya bowed deeply to the crowd, and the cleavage in front of her chest caused the crowd to exclaim in surprise. It had to be said that in this kind of slightly tense and depressing auction, such a woman was indeed pleasing to the eyes. Today's auction is carefully prepared by our Golden Flame auction house. There are countless precious treasures. The auction catalog has already appeared in everyone's hands. I'm sure everyone is looking forward to it. Enya's red lips were slightly raised. Her bright eyes looked at the black mass below the stage, but her face was calm and composed. Next, I will start the auction with the first item. In order to avoid vicious competition, each bid must not be less than 100 spirit stones. At the same time, I need to remind everyone of the rules of our auction house. I don't wish for any trouble to occur during the auction. Otherwise, you will become an unwelcome guest of our auction house. There was a faint smile on Enya's face. It was obviously a warning, but when it came out of her mouth, it was not so stiff and hard to accept. That's not all. I hope that everyone can take note of their own wealth when bidding. If you bid for a treasure that you can't afford because of a momentary competition, I'm afraid the consequences will be extremely troublesome. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heard Enya's words, they couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. A big auction house is indeed a big auction house. The introduction at the beginning was not to arouse the crowd's enthusiasm, but to give everyone alarm after alarm. Chapter 32:45. I'm afraid that only an auction house like the Golden Flame auction house can do such a thing. If it was an ordinary auction house, just a few simple words would have destroyed everyone's interest and good impression. Shangwan Ying pouted. This scene was really unexpected. When Xiren smiled faintly, I think that this method is quite good. This way, the possibility of conflict can be minimized. The Golden Flame auction house holds an auction every day. If there is always vicious competition or people who owe money, wouldn't it be troublesome? It seems that it's not easy to cause trouble in this auction house. Xiao He frowned. In that case, if we can't get the tears of glacial flame, it won't be that easy to steal it back. As soon as she said that, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three changed slightly. This was the first time they had come to the Golden Flame auction house. However, judging from everything that had happened before, the rules of the Golden Flame auction house were extremely strict. It was almost impossible for them to do anything sneaky here. Now, our biggest hope is that Steward Qin can get the tears of glacial flame. After all, his wealth is much more than ours. When Xiren sighed, just as everyone was talking, the first auction item was brought up. There was almost no need for Enya to introduce it. The enthusiasm of the bidders below the stage had completely exploded. In fact, all the items in this auction were very attractive to cultivators. As long as they were brought out, it was enough to attract everyone's fiery gazes. Therefore, after Enya mentioned a base price, the sound of bidding continued to ring out. Every time a sign was raised, Enya would call out a new price. Looking at such a lively scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were also amazed. This degree of enthusiasm was more explosive than they had imagined. There are really many rich people in Penglai Island. Just this first auction item will probably be sold for an incredible price. Shangwan Ying stared at the black mass of ordinary cultivators below the stage and sighed in her heart. These people were really capable. Compared to the predicament they were in when they came to Penglai Island, if it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang's medicine to help them get out of the predicament, they would probably only be able to watch helplessly even if they came to participate in the auction now. Comparisons were odious. This point was not wrong at all. The items at the beginning of the auction are just appetizers. The competition will become more intense as the auction progresses. At that time, we will be able to see the true strength of these cultivators. When Zyron shook his head, they are really evil rich people. Most of the people who bought these things are ordinary cultivators, and the people we'll be bidding later on are probably the various powers. These people also know that if they want to bid for the treasures at the back, there is basically no hope. They can only put all their hopes on the items at the front of the auction. As long as it helps their own cultivation, it is not a loss. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Chapter 3246. There's no rush. Di Beichen's expression was calm. Hongzhuang said that the tears of frosty flame are useless to ordinary people. I presume that even if someone bids for it, it won't be sold for too high a price. After all, other treasures are much more attractive than the tears of frosty flame in their eyes. Everyone nodded. They could only look forward to it now. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on the auction catalog. The map fragment that she was interested in was very close to the front. It wouldn't be long before it would be auctioned. She was determined to get this map fragment. Hongzhuang, what are you looking at? Shangguan Ying couldn't help but ask when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang looking at the auction catalog. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and pointed at the map fragment on the auction catalog. We have to think of a way to get this map fragment. As soon as these words were spoken, a wisp of curiosity appeared on the faces of Shangguan Ying and Wen Xiren. Incomplete map? It's only a quarter of the map fragment. What do we need it for? Beichen and I got this map fragment a few years ago. Including this map fragment that's being auctioned now, we have 3. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Shangguan Ying's eyes lit up. Really? Are you sure that the map fragment you got before is the same as this one? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Of course. This map fragment is very special. It's impossible to copy it. As her voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang directly took out the 2 pieces of the map and said, "Take a look." Shangguan Ying and Xiren each took a map fragment and compared it with the map fragment in the catalog. Their eyes lit up. It's really the same map fragment. What a coincidence. It's such a small chance for you to find it. We also think that it's a coincidence. Maybe it's fate. Di Beichen's lips curved slightly. Since we found it, we naturally have to get it. Xiren looked at the map fragment in his eyes. However, no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't understand where it was drawn. He couldn't help but ask, "Do you know where this map fragment points to? Could it be a treasure?" "Oh no." Di Beichen shook his head helplessly. "I'm afraid we can't tell before the 4 map fragments are gathered. However, the method used to draw this map fragment is very special. Everything is done in such a secretive manner that it shouldn't be something ordinary. In my opinion, this might be a treasure map." Xiren's eyes lit up with interest. "I didn't think that there would be such an interesting thing. If it really is a treasure map, then we've struck it rich." Looking at Xiren's excited expression, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh and shake their heads. Even if they had seen the 3rd map fragment, they couldn't be sure where the 4th map fragment was. It was very likely that they would never find it in their lifetime. Keep dreaming. Shangguan Ying glanced at Xiren. The map fragments are scattered all over the Shengxian continent. Who knows where the last one is? Chapter 3247. The next item to be auctioned is today's 10th auction item, the incomplete map. On the auction stage, a tray was placed in front of Enya, and a piece of the incomplete map was placed on the tray. This incomplete map was accidentally obtained by our auction house. Because its production method is extremely special, we concluded that the things drawn on this incomplete map are probably not simple. However, because this incomplete map is only a quarter of the complete map, we decided to sell it. If you bid for it, once you gather all 4 pieces of the incomplete map, you may get a great opportunity. Now, the bidding begins, and the starting price is 10,000 spirit stones. As Enya's voice fell, the atmosphere in the room froze for a moment. For the other treasures, everyone was very interested in buying them, but for this incomplete map, no one was so enthusiastic about it. Since the Golden Flame auction house had appraised it as an extraordinary map fragment, its value was definitely not low. However, it was only a quarter of the incomplete map fragment. Everyone knew how difficult it was to find the other 3/4. Even if one bought this incomplete map fragment, they would only be able to look at it. There was no point in it at all, unless one was extremely lucky and was confident that they could gather all 4 incomplete maps. Therefore, there was a moment of silence. Inya's face was always filled with a faint smile. Even if there was an awkward silence, she did not show the slightest bit of nervousness. She just looked at the people below the stage indifferently. It was very rare for the items sold by the Golden Flame auction house to go unsold, and for an auction of this level, the possibility of it going unsold was even smaller. Bailey Hongzhuang was not in a hurry to bid. So far, she had not seen anyone in the private room bid. Even if they wanted to bid, it was best to wait until everyone raised the price to a similar level. This way, they could avoid many problems. Although they didn't have the qualifications to sit in this private room, since they were already here, they should show their identity. This awkward silence did not last long, and soon, cultivators began to bid. 15,000 spirit stones, 11,000 spirit stones. Because it was too difficult to gather all the pieces of the incomplete map, everyone did not bid high. After all, if they couldn't gather all the pieces, it was no different from a piece of scrap paper. It was okay if they spent a small price to buy it back as a memento, but if they spent a high price just for such a hope, there was really something wrong with them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were relieved after hearing the increase in price. Since no one was determined to get the incomplete map, they should be able to get it at a lower price. 15,000 spirit stones. At this time, a familiar voice came into the ears of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, causing their gazes to change a little. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 looked at each other, and a hint of surprise appeared in their eyes. Gao Hanshun is actually bidding for this incomplete map? That voice sounds like him. Shangwan Yingying nodded her head. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. I didn't expect Gao Hanshun to be interested in this map. Chapter 3248. Gao Hanshun doesn't look like someone who would be interested in the map fragment. When Xiren sighed, he really didn't want to have anything to do with Gao Hanshun anymore. He didn't expect that they would be involved in the end. It really made him feel helpless. Di Beicheng glanced at the ordinary seats below indifferently. I'm afraid some things are destined. Don't worry about them. Let's just take care of ourselves. Hearing Di Beicheng's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also felt that this was an ill-fated relationship. Encountering Gao Hanshun and the others would be a disaster for both them and Gao Hanshun. If Gao Hanxiao and Gao Hanshou hadn't harbored ill intentions towards them, they wouldn't have taken their lives. Similarly, if Gao Hanshun hadn't threatened to take their lives and hunted them down on Emerald Island, they wouldn't have let the Jintian faction fall to its current state. In the end, Gao Hanshun was the unluckiest one. They didn't suffer much loss, but they were in a lot of trouble. 20,000 spirit stones. Gao Hanshun called out again. He was determined to get this map fragment. Long ago, he had coincidentally obtained an incomplete map. Although he did not understand what was drawn on it, he could feel the uniqueness of this map. He always felt that it was absolutely not simple. All these years, he had been collecting this map fragment, hoping that he would have the chance to see the other 3 map fragments in the future. However, he hadn't received any news. He didn't expect to see this map fragment in the Golden Flame auction house's catalog. He immediately felt that this was fate and that this map fragment would definitely fall into his hands. He believed that he could really collect all these map fragments in his lifetime. Perhaps the secret behind this map fragment would be enough for him to live comfortably. As Gao Hanchuan's bid was heard, the auction house couldn't help but fall silent. When the price of this map fragment reached such a high level, no one had any intention of continuing to bid. Seeing this, Gao Hanshun couldn't help but smile. It seemed that this map fragment was going to fall into his hands. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the private room. 30,000 spirit stones. As this voice fell, a hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of many cultivators present. They were very clear about the rules of the Golden Flame Auction House. It was not a place that could be entered with money alone. One must have sufficient power and background on Penglai Island. Therefore, every cultivator who could enter the Golden Flame Auction House was someone that everyone wanted to befriend. However, usually, the people in this box would only start bidding at the end of the auction. He didn't expect them to be interested in this map fragment. For a time, everyone's interest in the map fragment couldn't help but increase slightly. However, when they thought about the identity and status of the other party, it was utterly meaningless for them to participate in the competition. On the contrary, they might even offend the other party. It was truly unwise. Thus, practically everyone had given up on continuing the competition. However, when Gao Hanshun heard the voice, his face suddenly became extremely unsightly because he was familiar with the voice. It's these despicable fellows again. Chapter 3249. Big Brother, these guys are obviously here to mess things up. Lu Jiangang frowned. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the others to be so despicable. They were just bidding for an incomplete map, yet they wanted to mess things up like this. Gui Jun's face darkened. If they deliberately mess things up, I'm afraid it won't be so easy for us to get this incomplete map. I'm afraid the price will be much higher than what we're paying now. There's no other way. I'm determined to get this incomplete map. Gao Hanshun's eyes were filled with a fierce and determined light. If he did not have the other incomplete map, it would be fine. Now that the other incomplete map had appeared, how could he let go of this opportunity? Lu Jiangang and Gui Jun obviously knew Gao Hanshun's thoughts about this incomplete map. There were a total of 4 incomplete maps. Gao Hanshun was already extremely lucky to have encountered 2 of them. If he missed it, no one would be willing to do so. However, based on the current situation, they were afraid that they would have to pay a higher price to get this incomplete map back. Big Brother, I believe that they are deliberately using this opportunity to mess with us. Even if they win the bid for the map fragment, it will be useless. Although the price may be higher, it will still fall into our hands in the end, Gui Jun said thoughtfully. Hearing Gui Jun's words, Gao Hanshun also nodded. His thoughts are the same as Gui Jun's. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had just arrived at Penglai Island not long ago. He did not believe that the other party would be rich enough to spend a sum of spirit stones to buy a useless map back. 35,000 spirit stones, Gao Hanshun said again. He wanted to see how much Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could bid. After seeing that Gao Hanshun continued to compete with the cultivators in the private room, a look of surprise appeared in the eyes of the cultivators in the ordinary seats. 50,000 spirit stones, Di Beichun said without hesitation. They had to get this incomplete map. Instead of slowly raising the price like this, it was better to raise the price directly to let the other party know that they were determined to get it. Seeing that the voice from the private room had begun to raise the price by a large margin, a look of understanding appeared in the eyes of the cultivators present. As long as they bid with the cultivators in the private room, the result would often be like this. Even if the cultivators in the ordinary seats were rich, they could not be compared with the cultivators in the private room. You may think that you have spent a lot of money, but for the cultivators in the private room, it was just a drop in the ocean. 55,000 spirit stones. Gao Hanshun clenched his teeth and said, if it was with his original wealth, taking out these spirit stones would be nothing. But unfortunately, the heaven-shaking faction had encountered a great change. He had taken out all his money to save the heaven-shaking faction, so his wealth had been greatly reduced and could not be compared to before. This teeth. After Di Beichun and the others saw that Gao Hanshun was so obsessed with the map, the light in their eyes gradually became complicated. Chapter 3250. Hearing Xiren's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. In fact, it wasn't just when Xiren who had this idea, they had the same idea. If they were interested, it was still possible to buy the map fragment at a low price. But if they spent too much money, it wouldn't be worth it. What's more, according to their understanding of the situation, the Jintian faction was in a very bad situation. Gao Hanshun and the others obviously didn't have any spare money, so this move was very interesting. If the fourth map fragment is really in Gao Hanshun's hands, then we can put the 4 map fragments together, right? Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. Originally, they were thinking about how to find the 4th map fragment, but now it appeared directly in front of them. If that's the case, doesn't that mean I was right? A smile appeared on Xiren's face. He had previously said that it would be easy for them to obtain the 4th map fragment, and that it would soon appear in front of them. He didn't expect that not long after he said this, the 4th map fragment might really appear. This was too much of a coincidence. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were speechless. They really didn't expect Xiren's whimsical words to become reality. However, if this was true, then it was really good news. Originally, we didn't want to make a move on Gao Hanshun and the others so early. Now that the situation has become like this, it seems that we have to make a move on them early. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. Just for this possibility, they had to check Gao Hanshun and the others' Chinkoan bags. 70,000 spiritual stones. Di Beichun said again, but his eyes were fixed on the ordinary seats. He could feel that Gao Hanshun had hesitated when he called out the price of 55,000 spiritual stones. Obviously, he didn't have much money on him. He raised the price of 70,000 spiritual stones to test how much Gao Hanshun valued this map fragment. If Gao Hanshun could bid again, then the possibility of the 4th map fragment being in Gao Hanshun's possession would be extremely high. Facing the price of 70,000 spirit stones, Gao Hanshun's eyes were bloodshot. This damned Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were forcing him into a dead end. He only had a total of 100,000 spirit stones on him. He still had to continue living in the future. Now that he no longer had the income from the heaven-shaking faction, the possibility of him joining the Crimson Moon sect was greatly reduced. He was prepared to keep some spirit stones for future use. If he had a hand over all his wealth because of this incomplete map, it would undoubtedly be extremely disadvantageous to him. However, he didn't want to give up on the map fragment just like that. After everyone saw that Gao Hanshun had fallen into silence, a mocking expression appeared on their faces. It's just a fragment of a map. Why is this guy trying so hard? No matter how hard he tries, it's useless. From the looks of it, he's already at the end of his rope. I'm afraid he's already reached the bottom line of the price he can afford. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have competed in the beginning. Now that he's offended the cultivators in the private room, isn't he just asking for trouble? The crowd shook their heads and sighed. Such a move was simply too unwise. Chapter 3251. Once upon a time, no matter where he went, he was the center of everyone's attention. Even the cultivators from the 3 major forces didn't dare to laugh at him. After all, it was better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Even if the Heaven-Shaking Association couldn't be compared to the 3 major forces, as the association leader, his status was still much higher than the ordinary cultivators from the 3 major forces. However, he just wanted to buy an incomplete map, yet he was ridiculed for overestimating himself. How ironic was this? Thinking of this, Gao Hanshun couldn't help but call out again, 80,000 spirit stones. However, when he called out this price, Gao Hanshun was already filled with anger. These 4 damned bastards, step by step, they were pushing him into a corner. One day, he would tear these 4 bastards into pieces. Seeing Gao Hanshun bid again, Di Beichun's deep and wise eyes flashed with a faint light, but the corners of his lips slowly rose into a smile. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichun's expression and couldn't help but ask, "You don't plan to continue bidding? Since there will be a battle between us sooner or later, What difference does it make whether we buy it or they buy it? Di Beichen's lips curled into a faint smile. Whether they win or Gao Hanshun wins in the end, these 4 incomplete map pieces will definitely be pieced together. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Indeed, but I'm afraid our plan will have to be brought forward. With Gao Hanshun's speed of offending people, I'm afraid we don't know when he will lose his life. We can't let this map piece fall into the hands of others. Xiren moved closer to Di Beichen and said, "In that case, you all agree with me. The 4th map piece is in Gao Hanshun's hands." "Most likely," Di Beichen nodded. "If not, Gao Hanshun wouldn't be so desperate for this map piece." Suddenly, the smile in everyone's eyes deepened. They didn't expect that they would really be able to complete the map piece. Their luck was really extraordinary. "In that case, will Gao Hanshun and the others know that we have the map piece?" Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but ask. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and shook her head. Her lips curled into a faint smile. "In my opinion, Gao Hanshun probably thinks that we are deliberately messing with them, so he raised the price. After all, we didn't bid first, but waited for them to bid." Speaking of which, Gao Hanshun had actually taken advantage of them by bidding a little later. Otherwise, Gao Hanshun would be the one who knew what was going on. "That's great." When Xiren's eyes shone with joy. "Once we put these 4 pieces of the map together, we will know what kind of secret lies behind it. It's too early to talk about this. Even if we want to deal with Gao Hanshun and the others, we have to think about it carefully and come up with a foolproof plan. Otherwise, if we are careless and lose our lives, that would be terrible." Di Beichen smiled. After Gao Hanshun called out the price of 80,000 spiritual stones, his gaze lingered on the private room on the 2nd floor. He wanted to see if Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would continue. However, he knew very well that if the other party continued to raise the price, he would have to give up on this path. Chapter 3252. Just when everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would continue to bid, there was no news from them at all. Regarding this, everyone was also shocked. Their minds were somewhat unable to react. Logically speaking, such a price was nothing to the cultivators in the private room. Similarly, after Gao Hanshun and the others saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had stopped bidding, they were even more certain that these guys were deliberately making them pay more spirit stones. Inyu was also a little surprised by this scene, but she was very grateful to the cultivators in the private room. If it weren't for them, it would be difficult for this map fragment to be auctioned at such a price. 80,000 spirit stones, according to the value of this map fragment, was already considered a very good price. In the end, the map fragment fell into Gao Hanshun's hands, but Gao Hanshun, who got this map fragment, did not feel the slightest joy, only a kind of humiliation. After Manager Jean arranged all kinds of things for the auction, he came to Di Lao's room. He felt that it was necessary to report what had just happened to Di Lao. "Di Lao, I just saw Di Bei and Di Chun in the auction hall. What surprised me was that the young master actually knew them and claimed to be good friends with Di Chun," Manager Jean said, while sizing up Di Lao. According to his understanding, the young master was usually not in Penglai Island. Logically speaking, it was impossible for them to know each other. If Di Chun was really a good friend of the young master, then their plan could not be used against Di Chun. Listening to Manager Jin's words, Di Lao's face could not help but show a touch of surprise. "They're friends." Manager Jin nodded. "This is what the young master said personally. Not only that, the young master also let me arrange for them to enter the private room to participate in the auction." Di Lao was silent for a moment. The look in his eyes constantly changed. Could it be that this was fate? He was very clear about his young master's personality. Ordinary people could not enter the young master's eyes at all. Even Di Chun, he was just a very ordinary cultivator. He did not even have the opportunity to see the young master. Now, he could actually become friends with the young master. How could this not surprise him? "I already know about this matter. You go and pay attention to the auction, especially the auction of the Tears of Cold Flame. After the auction is over, come and report to me." "Yes." Manager Jean retreated, but the doubts in his heart became more and more intense. He faintly felt that Di Lao had other purposes for looking for Di Chun and the others, but he was simply unwilling to tell him. Not long after Manager Jean left, Elder Emperor also arrived before Di Yujue. "Young lord." Elder Di bowed respectfully. Di Yujue turned around and glanced at Di Lao. He nodded and said, "Sit." "Young master, I heard that you become friends with a young man?" Elder Di asked. The corners of Di Yujue's lips curled up slightly, and a smile appeared in his eyes. "I didn't expect you to be so well informed. You already know about it so quickly. To be honest, young master, the person I was talking about is him. His surname is also Di." Elder Di said slowly. "He is a cultivator from the outside world who came to Punlai Island not long ago. I think this is very coincidental." Chapter 3253. Old Emperor nodded. "That's right. Half a year ago, when they first came to Punlai Island, I was the one who received them, so I know the situation very well. If that's the case, then I'm not just fated to meet him." Di Yujue chuckled. "No wonder I had a special feeling when I first saw him." "Young master, do you think he is?" Old Emperor asked tentatively. He and Di Baichen had only met once, but he felt that this young man gave him a very good impression. Di Yujue immediately understood Old Emperor's meaning and shook his head. "Although I feel that I'm fated to meet him, you and I both know that with the standard of the Shengxian continent's doctors, it's impossible for them to discover the cursed body, let alone cure him. This Di Baichen is young, but his cultivation is very outstanding. According to my judgment, he should be around 23 or 24 years old. With our family situation, if he can't solve the problem of his physique at this age, it's impossible for him to cultivate to the 5th level of the Purple Realm." Hearing Di Yujue's words, Old Emperor couldn't help but sigh. In fact, he also felt that it was impossible, but since it was such a coincidence, maybe there really was a glimmer of hope. In the end, this was still his wishful thinking. What's more, now that we've collected all the Purple Dragon Emperor ginseng and frosty tears in the entire Shengxian continent, there's no way he can be cured. How can he be like Di Baichen? At this point, Di Yujue's face couldn't help but show a touch of pain. If we still can't find him, I'm afraid he'll really be in danger. As the time approached, the atmosphere in their family became more and more tense. Now, he couldn't even return to the family. As long as he returned to the family, he would definitely face the family master's curses and his wife's resentment. He really regretted it, but unfortunately, he couldn't find any news after searching for so long. It wasn't that he didn't want to go back to the family and face all of this, but his heart was already uncomfortable enough. Facing his family, the guilt in his heart was even stronger. Yes, it was all his fault. Otherwise, my family would not have been unable to be happy for so many years. Looking at Di Yujue's expression, Elder Di instinctively wanted to comfort him, but unfortunately, he swallowed his words. At this point, no amount of consolation would be of any use. I'm preparing to make a trip to the outside world. Even if there's only a sliver of hope, I can't let it go. Di Yujue's gaze became resolute. However, I recently received some news. A very reliable piece of news has appeared in the outside world. I have to personally confirm it. Old Emperor nodded. I hope it's good news this time. Little young master, we really hope to find you soon. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 sat in the private room and watched the items being auctioned off one by one. They didn't have much interest in the items and were only waiting for the Tears of Frigid Heat to be sold. However, the later the auction went on, the higher the price of the item became. When the Tears of Frigid Heat was about to be auctioned, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but worry that they wouldn't be able to obtain it with their current wealth. Next up is the 35th item, Tears of Frigid Flame. Chapter 3254. For a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were all in high spirits, and their gazes immediately focused on the auction stage. The tears of frosty flame is an extremely precious medicinal herb. Its growth requirements are extremely harsh, and it takes hundreds of years to grow. As long as one has some understanding of medicine, they should know its value. Inya's face had a faint smile as she introduced the effects of the tears of frosty flame to everyone. Among the cultivators present, it was obvious that most of them were unfamiliar with the tears of frosty flame. In fact, every time a medicinal herb was auctioned, it could be sold at a very good price. The premise was that the medicinal herb could help a cultivator increase their strength. Everyone was completely focused on the tears of frosty flame. It was a crystal blue fruit that was blooming with an alluring luster. It was extremely attractive. However, after listening for a long time, the crowd did not hear that the tears of frosty flame would help a cultivator's cultivation. Immediately, the anticipation in their eyes faded by a lot. No matter how precious this medicinal herb was, it was meaningless if it did not increase one's cultivation. Tears of frosty flame, starting price, 100,000 spirit stones. As Inya's voice fell, the eyes of all the cultivators present flashed with deep surprise. They were not interested in this medicinal herb, but the starting price of this medicinal herb was actually so high. It was truly beyond their expectations. This also proved that the Golden Flame auction house's price for this medicinal herb was very high. 105,000 spirit stones. Very quickly, the first bid rang out. 110,000 spirit stones. In the private room, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had been staring at the situation below. Their plan was the same as before, to wait for the ordinary cultivators to bid a certain price before making a move. If they made a move too early, it would expose their eagerness for the tears of frosty flame. Furthermore, they still had to see Steward Sheen's plan. Looking at the situation, most cultivators are not interested in the tears of frosty flame. Xiren was a little relieved. The competition for the previous auction items was not ordinary. Almost every time a bid sounded out, it was immediately covered by another voice. Therefore, he had always been a little worried that the tears of frosty flame would be auctioned off in the same situation. Fortunately, based on the current situation, the tears of frosty flame obviously did not have such a craze. 150,000 spiritual stones. After a cultivator from the ordinary seats raised the price to 150,000, the voices calling out bids gradually died down. It was clear that no one was too interested in the tears of frosty flame. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. It was time to make a move. Manager Jin's gaze had been fixed on a box where Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four were. He wanted to confirm whether or not Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four had come to the auction for the tears of frosty flame. At the very least, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had never bid for anything other than the incomplete map. However, Steward Jean also thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were only bidding for the map fragments to Prang Gaohan Shun and the other two. Their real purpose had not been revealed yet. However, just as Steward Jean thought that it was time for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to make a move, a bidding voice suddenly rang out from the box. 200,000 spiritual stones. Chapter 32:55. 200,000 spirit stones. This price was not something that had not been reached in previous auctions. On the contrary, many auction items have been sold for more than 200,000 spirit stones. What shocked everyone was not the price, but the speed at which the other party increased the price. In one breath, he had increased the price by 50,000 spirit stones. This was really a big deal. It was obvious that the other party was determined to get the tears of glacial flame. Moreover, the voice came from the private room. The aura that it revealed was extremely impressive. The cultivator in the ordinary seats who had bid 150,000 spirit stones was obviously shocked by the sudden bid from the private room. For a moment, he did not know if he should continue to bid or give up. 250,000 spirit stones. After thinking for a moment, the cultivator still made a tentative bid. This price was not beyond the range of what he could afford. Moreover, it was a little too cowardly to admit defeat just because of one sentence from the other party. However, just as the cultivator made his bid, the voice in the private room rang out again. 250,000 spirit stones. Compared to this cultivator's lack of confidence in probing, the voices in the private room were like a violent storm that pressed down on his body, not giving him any room to breathe at all. The other party directly used this method to tell him that it was impossible to fight with him. The cultivator hesitated for a moment and put down his hand that was about to raise the paddle. The other party was rich and overbearing. There was no point in continuing the competition. If he offended the other party because of this, it would be very troublesome. I don't know who is sitting in the private room. This bid is really domineering. Every time he raises the price by 50,000 spirit stones, he doesn't seem to care at all. This is the true definition of rich and overbearing. To us, 50,000 spirit stones is an incredible price. To this kind of person, I'm afraid it's just a game. He doesn't care at all. The people present were all shrewd people. Just from a nonchalant voice in the private room, they could tell that the other party really did not care and was not pretending. This fake aura was completely different from the real aura. Everyone immediately began to guess the true identity of the cultivator in the box. However, everyone was unfamiliar with the voice and could not determine who it was. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, who were about to bid, looked at each other after hearing this voice. Looking at the situation, they didn't need to bid for the time being. Steward Qin's offer is really domineering. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. He was using his power to oppress others, forcing the other party to not dare to compete with him. Obviously, Steward Qin was also a veteran of auctions, so he understood this situation very well. She could tell that the other party definitely did not have the ability to continue bidding, but was shocked by Steward Qin's aura, so he had no choice but to give up. If one could possess such an aura, they would be able to intimidate many people during the auction. However, without sufficient foundation, ordinary people would not be able to feign such an aura. Chapter 32:56. I didn't see Steward Qin before, so I thought he didn't come. I didn't expect him to be in the box next to us. A hint of surprise appeared in Xiaohei's eyes. Previously, when he was waiting in the auction hall, he had been looking for Steward Qin's figure. However, even after looking through everyone in the auction hall, he still did not see Steward Qin's figure. He never thought that Steward Qin would actually be in the box next to them. Deep Beichun smiled faintly. With Steward Qin's identity, he must have taken the VIP passage of the Golden Flame auction house. There's no need for him to wait outside like us. So that's how it is. Xiaohei suddenly realized this Golden Flame auction house is really thorough. The difference in treatment between the rich and the poor. Steward Qin naturally determined the owner of this voice and couldn't help but feel helpless in his heart. He had already expected that Steward Qin would be extremely angry after finding out that he had used the tears of frigid flame as an auction item. He even thought that the next time he saw Steward Qin would definitely treat him coldly. However, he didn't expect Steward Qin to actually go to such an extent and come to bid for the tears of frigid flame himself. This surprised Steward Qin, but at the same time, it also made him secretly sigh that Steward Qin really cared about this business. If it was a normal situation, Steward Qin wouldn't go through so much trouble. After thinking about it carefully, Steward Qin immediately understood. He and Steward Qin had known each other for so long, so he understood the latter's temper very well. He was afraid that the latter had treated this matter as a provocation to his dignity, which was why he had done such a thing. Steward Qin faintly sighed. He didn't want to do this on purpose, but he couldn't disobey the emperor's orders. He could only swallow this grievance himself. No matter how much Steward Qin resented him, he could only endure it. After Steward Qin made his bid, there were also sounds of bidding from the other boxes. However, without exception, they were all directly suppressed by Steward Qin with a higher price. This also allowed everyone to truly see Steward Sheen's rich and imposing side. These spirit stones seemed to be just a number to him, and he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache when he said it. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were also dumbfounded at this scene. They suddenly felt that they didn't need to come to this auction. If Steward Sheen was unable to take down the Tears of Cold Flame, then it would be impossible for them to take it down. After seeing Steward Sheen's fierce bid, Inya's expression became a little strange. Logically speaking, as an auctioneer, being able to sell this item at a high price was the most desirable thing to see. However, for some reason, she felt that the other party had revealed a certain conviction when bidding and a trace of dissatisfaction with their auction house. Although this trace of dissatisfaction was very faint, Inya still felt that her judgment was not wrong. Therefore, under such circumstances, Inya was somewhat frightened. Manager Jean had been waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to bid, so that he could complete the task given to him by the Emperor. However, after being disturbed by Steward Sheen, he was completely helpless. This was because he did not see any movement coming from the box where Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were. Chapter 3257. Manager Jean could not help but scratch his head. He really hoped that Steward Sheen would not come out to stir up trouble at this time. If he could not complete the task given by the Emperor, it would be a big problem for him. However, it was obvious that Steward Sheen would not hear the prayers in Manager Jin's heart. This time, he had come with a determination to obtain it. It was absolutely impossible for Manager Jean to use this matter to cut him off and even slap his face. He wanted Manager Jean to understand that it was not an easy task to plot against him behind his back. In the blink of an eye, the auction price of the Tears of Cold Flame had reached 500,000 spirit stones. Everyone present could only sigh in amazement at this price. It was just a medicinal ingredient, and it was a medicinal ingredient that did not help a cultivator's cultivation at all. Yet, it was auctioned at such a sky-high price. What else could they say? This was completely a game between the rich. Other than taking a look, they did not have the qualifications to participate in the game at all. After Steward Sheen raised the price to 500,000 spirit stones, the other boxes also stopped bidding. It was just a stalk of medicinal herb. Paying such a price was really a little crazy. Mo Xingyu was one of the few people who knew of Steward Sheen's identity. However, after seeing Steward Sheen's crazy actions, he could not help but be dumbfounded. What's wrong with Steward Sheen? As far as I know, he was the one who sold the Tears of Cold Flame to the Golden Flame auction house. Why is he buying it back now? Mo Xingyu frowned. The price was too shocking. He felt that this matter was not so simple. Oh no, this is too abnormal. Although the Tears of Cold Flame are precious, they don't have much use. Steward Sheen is not an alchemist, so it's meaningless for him to buy this thing back. However, these are nothing. What surprised me the most was that Steward Sheen actually came out of the magic refining tower and specially came to Penglai Island to participate in the auction. This is too abnormal. Mo Xingyu nodded. Is there a conflict between Steward Sheen and Steward Jean? I feel that Steward Sheen seems to be resentful. In any case, we don't have much of a need for the Tears of Cold Flame. It's better not to get involved at this time. The people of the 100 Flowers Gate immediately decided to withdraw from this competition. It was very unwise to get involved in a conflict between two factions for a medicinal ingredient that they didn't really need. Manager Jean, at the moment, there is no one who can continue to compete with Steward Sheen. Should we just let him take the Tears of Cold Flame back, or make a move? When the bidding reached a peak, the people of the auction house saw that the situation was not right and immediately reported it to Manager Jean. Hearing this, a hint of helplessness appeared on Manager Jin's face. In the end, he was still unable to test the thoughts of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. It could be considered that he had been completely destroyed by Steward Sheen. Instruct someone to bid for the Tears of Frosty Flame. Manager Jean ordered without hesitation. Old Emperor only told him to use the Tears of Frost Flame to lure Di Beichun and the others out. He didn't say that he was going to sell the Tears of Frostflame. Chapter 3258. Hearing Manager Jin's instructions, his subordinates immediately rushed to the auction venue. They could not delay any longer, otherwise, the Tears of Frosty Flame would fall into Steward Sheen's hands. However, Manager Jin did not have the mood to pay attention to this. His mind was filled with how he was going to explain this to Elder D. He had messed up this matter, and things were a little troublesome. Looking at the situation, there shouldn't be anyone competing with Steward Sheen anymore. A faint smile appeared on Shangwan Yingying's face. As long as Steward Sheen could obtain the Tears of Frosty Flame, they would be able to relax. Looking at Shangwan Yingying's optimistic appearance, Di Beichun shook his head with a complicated expression. I'm afraid things aren't that simple. Faintly, he had a premonition that this matter would not be completed so easily. If the Golden Flame Auction House was really willing to auction the Tears of Frosty Flame in exchange for money, it would be better to directly discuss with Steward Sheen and hand over the Tears of Frosty Flame to him. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Di Beichun. She had never said anything, but in fact, she also had a bad premonition in her heart. Most of the time, when things went too smoothly, there would often be something wrong. What does this mean? Shangwan Yingying raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichun with a puzzled expression. I really don't want any more problems to happen. Di Beichun did not answer. He was currently unable to judge how this matter would develop. At this moment, the sound of a bid came from another box. 550,000 spirit stones. As this voice fell, everyone's expression changed. It seemed that the unforeseen event that they did not want to see the most had happened. The cultivators participating in the auction were also dumbfounded. It was one thing for a Tears of Frosty Flame to be auctioned for a sky-high price of 500,000 spirit stones, but now there was actually someone raising the price. This was too terrifying. Most importantly, according to Inya's introduction, they did not discover the preciousness of the Tears of Frosty Flame. Could it be that they had misjudged, and the Tears of Frosty Flame was actually an extremely precious treasure? After hearing this voice, Steward Sheen's expression immediately became ugly. This damned Manager Jin. He actually dared to play this trick on me. Steward Sheen snorted coldly. Others did not know of Steward Jin's methods, but he was not unfamiliar with them. Previously, almost everyone had given up on competing for this item. Now, someone who had never placed a bid before had suddenly appeared. Needless to say, this person must be someone from the Golden Flame Auction House. It seemed that Manager Jin had made up his mind not to let the Tears of Glacial Flame fall into his hands. 600,000 spiritual stones. 650,000 spiritual stones. 700,000 spiritual stones. 800,000 spiritual stones. Every time someone called out a price, the cultivators present couldn't help but be shocked. The speed at which the price was raised was too fast. Moreover, with such a high price, both parties didn't hesitate at all. It was as if they didn't put these spirit stones in their eyes. 1,000,000 spirit stones. The anger in Steward Sheen's heart grew deeper and deeper. Back then, when he sold the Tears of Cold Flame to the Golden Flame Auction House, he didn't charge too much. Now that the Golden Flame Auction House was making such a ruckus, how could he not be angry? Chapter 3259. Oh my God, are the people in this box crazy? More than 1,000,000 spirit stones just to buy a set of medicinal herbs? No matter how precious a medicinal herb is, it can't be worth so many spirit stones, right? If they continue to compete like this, who knows what kind of price they will get? I'm afraid we are blind. This Tears of Frigid Flame must be an extraordinary medicinal herb. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent such a high price to compete for it. The crowd of cultivators began to discuss. Any medicinal herb that could be auctioned at such a price was usually extremely valuable. Although they didn't have the strength to compete for all of this, Today's matter was really an eye-opener for them. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three saw this scene, their expressions became ugly. This guy is deliberately causing trouble. Although the tears of frigid flame are precious, how can it be worth such a high price? A hint of anger quickly appeared on Shangguan Yingying's face. Originally, everything was going very smoothly, but from the looks of the current situation, it was very likely that it would be ruined. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes narrowed, and her expression quietly became heavy. This should be someone from the Golden Flame auction house. If it was an ordinary force, not to mention that the price has long exceeded the value of the tears of frigid flame, even if it was for Steward Qin's sake, they wouldn't continue to compete like this. Anyone could feel that Steward Qin and the other party were no longer bidding in a friendly manner. This clearly contained a strong sense of anger and hostility. Someone from the Golden Flame auction house made a move? Shangguan Yingying was stunned, and her face was filled with disbelief. It can't be? Then how can we buy it? Xiren patted Shangguan Yingying's shoulder and said, "You have always been in the sect, so I'm afraid you don't know much about the auction house. For some things that the auction house doesn't want to sell, they often choose to buy it back themselves. This is very common." Shangguan Yingying was different from the three of them. She had always been cultivating in the sect and had very few opportunities to go out, so she didn't know much about the outside world. Hearing this, Shangguan Yingying nodded helplessly. Obviously, she was still very speechless about this situation. Since they don't want to sell this thing, why take it out? Shangguan Yingying frowned. Wasn't this superfluous? It seems that the main purpose of the Golden Flame auction house is to lure us out. However, because Steward Qin has made his move, we cannot appear again. Therefore, they chose to take back the tears of frosty flame. Dibei Chen's eyes flashed with wisdom as he slowly analyzed the situation in front of him. At present, besides this possibility, there was no other possibility. Then if Steward Qin did not bid, but we did, would the tears of cold flame fall into our hands? Shangguan Yingying could not help but ask. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. That might not be the case. They might still take back the tears of glacial flame and come back to negotiate with us. The biggest problem now is that we don't know why Golden Flame Auction House wants to lure us out. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two with a deep gaze. This is what I'm most worried about. Chapter 3260. Di Beichun thought for a moment and said, "Although this is the biggest possibility, I feel that things might not be as simple as Steward Qin thinks. Just like how we don't know why the Golden Flame Auction House has been collecting the tears of glacial flame all these years." "I understand what you mean." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Her thoughts were the same as Di Beichen's. There were probably some problems that they had never thought of. Seeing that Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's expressions were getting more and more serious, Xiren could not help but wave his hand and said, "Forget it. Since things have developed to this point, I'm afraid it's useless for you to think more about it. Why don't you just wait like this? If the Golden Flame Auction House's purpose is to lure us out, I believe that they will definitely come looking for us. No matter what their purpose is, as long as we meet them, we will know sooner or later." As when Xiren's voice fell, although everyone felt helpless in their hearts, they knew that apart from this method, they really did not have any other way. The initiative was in the hands of the Golden Flame Auction House. All they could do was wait for news. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were talking, the price of the auction was getting more and more terrifying. Everyone in the auction house was stunned by the price. In the history of the Golden Flame Auction House, it was not that there had never been a situation where the price was raised to a very high level because of anger. However, it was really unheard of to raise the price to such an extent. The words spirit stones that came out of their mouths were no longer spirit stones, but just an ordinary number. Oh my God, these guys are too scary. If they continue to bid like this, the auction house will be the only one making money. Who asked them to be so rich? If they are willing to compete like this, we are happy to watch the show. I'm really impressed. Coming to the auction this time has really opened everyone's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were helpless when they saw this scene. The situation was already very clear. The Golden Flame auction house was clearly unwilling to hand over the tears of Cold Flame. And this Steward Qin was also a ruthless person. With Steward Qin's ability, I'm afraid he already knew that the person competing with him was someone from the auction house. However, he kept raising the price because he wanted to make things difficult for the Golden Flame auction house. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly. Although Steward Qin was a profiteer, she had to pay more attention to him when dealing with him. However, she had to admit that Steward Qin's current actions were indeed very satisfying. Steward Qin had done such a thing behind Steward Qin's back. If Steward Qin did not retaliate, it would not be worth it. If it were her, she would probably do the same. After all, since the other party was thinking of ways to make him unhappy, he naturally wouldn't let the other party be happy either. If this price continues, I'm afraid the Golden Flame auction house will be the one to be dumbfounded. Deep Bachin couldn't help but chuckle. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. The price has already risen to 2 million spirit stones. Although there are still many cultivators who don't understand the current situation, I'm afraid some people with discerning eyes have already seen it. If this continues, more and more people will know about it. This will also be a big blow to the reputation of the Golden Flame auction house. I believe Steward Qin will not sit idly by. Chapter 3261. Speaking of which, this matter was originally Manager Jin's unkindness. Steward Qin's approach is also very normal. It could be said that it's an eye for an eye. When Xiren chuckled, the competition between the two people in charge of the two great forces was really exciting. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. In my opinion, I'm afraid Manager Qin won't be able to sit still. On the auction stage, Inya's face, which had always been extremely calm and indifferent, stiffened when she saw the completely uncontrollable increase in price. As soon as she heard that voice, she had already determined that the other party was someone from the auction house that she was extremely familiar with. At that time, she had already understood Manager Jin's intentions. However, the person in the other box was unusually persistent. No matter how they raised the price, the other party always followed suit. In her opinion, the other party was simply deliberately looking for trouble. If this continued, once this truly sky-high price was spread out, everyone with discerning eyes would know the real situation. In the end, wouldn't it become a joke? Thinking of this, Inya couldn't help but feel a little anxious. This situation couldn't continue like this. Either the auction house would choose to give up, or they could only persuade the other party to give up. Otherwise, this auction would be ruined because of this increase in price. Inya immediately gave a look to the person next to her. After that person understood, he quickly went to find Manager Qin. This matter was completely out of their control. If it didn't stop it now, it would be too late. Manager Qin obviously didn't expect Steward Qin to be so stubborn. He'd been thinking about how to explain this matter to Di Lao. He didn't expect smoke to come out of the east and fire to come out of the west. It really made him anxious. How much has the price been raised now? Manager Qin asked. It's already 2 million spirit stones. The situation is completely out of control. All the guests are talking about this matter. Hearing this, Manager Qin couldn't help but pat his forehead. A deep sense of helplessness appeared on his face. It seemed that he had still underestimated Steward Qin's anger. He was afraid that if he couldn't give a reasonable explanation, Steward Qin would continue to make trouble. I understand. I'll deal with it. Steward Qin waved his hand, then sighed and immediately walked to the box where Steward Qin was. In the end, he still had to deal with the matter he had caused. He couldn't let Steward Qin ruin this auction. In the private room, when Steward Qin saw Steward Qin walk in with a smile on his face, he immediately understood the latter's plan. His eyes couldn't help but contain some sarcasm. Steward Qin, I didn't expect you to come to the auction, Steward Qin said with a smile. Since Manager Jean specially organized this auction, shouldn't you have expected that I would come? Steward Jean looked at Steward Jean coldly. His attitude was no longer the same as when he was familiar with Steward Jean. Instead, it was full of unfamiliarity and hostility. Hearing the hidden meaning in Steward Jean's words, Steward Jean also understood that it was useless for him to continue being so careless. He couldn't help but say, "Steward Jean, why don't we discuss this matter properly? If this continues, it won't do us any good." However, Steward Jean sneered, "I don't care if it's good for me or not. As long as it's bad for your auction house, it's fine." Chapter 3262. Looking at Steward Jean's unyielding attitude, Manager Jean also felt a burst of embarrassment in his heart. He and Steward Jean had known each other for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen the latter being so difficult to talk to. It seemed that it would be extremely difficult to mend their relationship this time. "Steward Jean, why are you doing this? No matter what, we have been friends for so many years. If things get to this point, it will be very awkward for us to meet again in the future," Manager Jean said. Hearing this, Steward Jean sat up straight and looked at Manager Jean with a smile that was not a smile. However, the depths of his eyes were filled with sarcasm and ridicule. "Manager Jean, you were the one who did this first, and now you're putting all these problems on me. Isn't this a bit too laughable?" "Steward Jean, things are not what you think." "If it's not what I think, then what is it?" Steward Jean raised his eyebrows. "I told you that I needed the Tears of Frostflame to discuss a business deal with the other party. You first promised me that you would do your best to help, and then you didn't respond to any news. You directly took out the Tears of Frostflame to auction. Wasn't it to lure the other party out? I've been doing business for so many years, and you want to cut me off and do it so obviously. What do you think I'll do?" At this moment, Steward Jean could no longer suppress his anger. He did not believe that Steward Jean, as a friend for so many years, would do such a thing, but now that things had come to this, it was useless for him to not believe it. Looking at Steward Jean's furious appearance, the helplessness and awkwardness on Manager Jean's face became even more intense. He immediately said, "Steward Jean, why don't you stop bidding first, and then I'll tell you about this matter properly. How about it?" "What a joke." Steward Jean laughed mockingly. "If I stop now, is there a need for you to continue talking to me?" Manager Jean waved his hand. "In any case, we have been friends for many years. I promise you that I will give you a satisfactory explanation. How about it? If I don't do it, you can tell me this news. I won't say anything." Steward Jean glanced at Manager Jean indifferently. After seeing that the other party's expression was extremely serious, his expression became a little better. "If you dare to trick me again in this matter, then there will be nothing to discuss between us in the future. Don't worry, it definitely won't happen," Manager Jean hurriedly promised. Seeing this, Steward Jean was silent for a moment before giving up on bidding. Enya, who was on the auction stage, quietly heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Steward Jean had finally stopped bidding. Fortunately, she did not cause too much trouble, and the Tears of Cold Flame was also taken back by the Golden Flame auction house. "You can speak now." From beginning to end, Steward Jean's face was cold. If the other party couldn't give him a satisfactory answer, he wouldn't let it go. Most importantly, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't think of any other reason for Steward Jean to do this. Steward Jean sat down beside Steward Jean. His chubby face was still full of smiles. "Steward Jean, to be honest, I really don't have any thoughts of snatching business from you." Steward Jean went straight to the point. "Then what is it for?" Chapter 3263. I also asked the reason for doing this, but the higher-ups are the higher-ups. If they don't want to tell me the reason, I can't do anything about it. You and I have been old friends for so many years. Although we sometimes scheme against each other, it's only because of the benefits. I really haven't done such a thing to undermine you." As he spoke, Manager Jean observed the change in Steward Cheen's expression. After discovering that Steward Cheen was still indifferent, he couldn't help but say, "I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. There are some things that I'm forced to do." Steward Cheen looked at Manager Jean with a complicated gaze. For a moment, he couldn't be sure whether what Manager Jean said was true or false. However, he also vaguely felt that what Steward Cheen said might not be false. After all, they had known each other for so many years, and he also had some understanding of the people behind Manager Jean. "Then you don't know the fundamental reason?" Steward Cheen was somewhat incredulous. If it wasn't for business, what's the use of luring them out? Manager Jean shook his head. "This is also what I don't understand. In fact, although I have been collecting the tears of Cold Flame all these years, I don't know what they are used for. Don't be angry with me because of this matter. After all, we have been friends for so many years. Next time, as long as I can give you the benefits within my ability, I will definitely give it to you. How about it?" Hearing Manager Jin's words, Steward Cheen did not immediately answer. In fact, he also had some doubts about Bailey Hongzhuang wanting to use the tears of Cold Flame to refine pills. He always felt that this matter was not so simple, but when he thought about it carefully, he did not know where the problem came from. "Is what you said true?" Manager Jean nodded with a serious expression. "I can swear that there is absolutely no deception." Steward Cheen looked at Manager Jean for a long time before saying, "I will believe you for the time being. If such a thing happens again in the future, don't blame me for not taking into account our past friendship. Not only that, I have one more request." Seeing that Steward Cheen had finally relented, Manager Jean heaved a sigh of relief. "Speak. If you want to participate in this business, you can't leave me behind." Steward Cheen said slowly. How could he allow the Golden Flame auction house to snatch away the business opportunity that he had found with great difficulty? At the very least, they should get a share of the loot. As soon as this was said, Manager Jean couldn't help but frown. "I'm afraid I can't make the decision on this matter. You don't have to tell me all this nonsense. If you can't do it, then the trouble between us will never end." After thinking for a moment, Manager Jean said, "I can't guarantee this matter, but I will try my best. Moreover, I don't think the decision made by the higher-ups is necessarily for business. Although I told them that you intend to use the tears of glacial flame to do business, they don't know what kind of business it is. I don't think it's possible for you to go through so much trouble for a business that you don't understand. Why don't you wait for my news first? We'll talk after everything is clear. What do you think?" Chapter 3264. It seems that Steward Jean and Steward Cheen have reached an agreement. Seeing that Steward Cheen had stopped bidding, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. Deep Beichun smiled faintly. It's absolutely impossible for Steward Jean to sit back and watch the situation become like this. I just don't know how they talked about it. With Steward Cheen's character, if he doesn't get some benefits, he will definitely not give up. When Zyron raised his eyebrows, "But this kind of thing obviously has nothing to do with us. Next, we can only wait for Steward Jean to contact us." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded. They only hoped that what Steward Jean talked to them about was not something they could not do. After all, the Golden Flame auction house was their only hope to get the tears of frigid heat. Once the negotiation failed, then all their hopes would be destroyed. There were no more problems in the following auction. Although the things being auctioned were very good, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were focused on the tears of frigid heat and did not have the time to pay attention to these things. Therefore, they did not bid for anything in the entire auction. Those four guys participated in the entire auction but did not bid for anything. It seems that they're also four poor ghosts. Until the auction came to an end, Lu Jiangang could not help but look at the box upstairs, his face full of sarcasm. When bidding for the map before, he thought that these guys had a lot of resources. He did not expect that from the beginning to the end. They just came here to look and did not make a move at all. There were so many treasures in a normal auction. He did not believe that they would not be able to enter the other party's eyes. It has only been half a year since they came to Punglai Island. It is not easy for them to earn spirit stones. They did that on purpose to make us spend a lot of money. Speaking of which, it is really abominable. Gui Jun's face was very ugly. With their previous wealth, they did not care about 10,000 spirit stones at all. But now, they had to pay tens of thousands of spirit stones, which was a big loss for them. Gao Hanchuan's face had been gloomy since the start of the auction. Since he met Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, he had already suffered a lot in the hands of these four guys. This time, he had actually fallen into the hands of the other party. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that this series of events had really hit him hard. He had been in Punglai Island for so many years and had always felt that he was very good. However, he did not expect that he would be fooled by four newcomers. One could imagine the displeasure in his heart. When we get back, we'll take our time to plan. If we can't tear these four fellows into 1,000 pieces, I'll never be satisfied. Gao Hanshun said fiercely. These four people had become a demon in his heart. If he couldn't kill these four people with his own hands, his cultivation would be greatly affected. As a cultivator, the most worrying thing was to have a demon in his heart. He had already felt that these four guys were his demon. Upon hearing Gao Hanchuan's words, Gui Jun and Lu Jiangang nodded their heads. They had already reached the end of their patience with these four fellows. The sooner they finished them off, the easier it would be for them to completely relax and avoid being unhappy. Chapter 3265. As soon as they walked out of the private room, they saw Steward Qin, who had also come out of the private room next door. When Steward Qin saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he couldn't help but look surprised. Obviously, he didn't expect to see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three here. He was very clear about the Golden Flame auction house's requirements for private rooms. Logically speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could only appear in the ordinary seats. It was impossible for them to appear here. For a moment, Steward Qin also had some doubts in his heart. Could it be that Steward Qin lied to him again? In fact, the Golden Flame auction house had already contacted Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, so they arranged for them to be in the private room. Seeing Steward Qin's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three revealed a faint smile. However, in order to not let others find out that they knew each other, neither side said a word. They only gave each other a look and tacitly left the Golden Flame auction house. This time, when they left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went through the auction house's VIP passage. There was no congestion at all, and it was very smooth for them to leave. I wonder if Gao Hanshun and the other two will be waiting for us at the door. Xiren raised his eyebrows. He had already felt Gao Hanchuan's strong murderous intent when they were in conflict. After the auction of the map fragments, Gao Hanshun probably hated them to the extreme. Deep Beichin chuckled. It's useless even if they wait. Our way out is on the other side of the street. For the sake of our treasure map, even if they don't come to us, we have to take the initiative to look for them. Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with excitement. She was really curious about the situation after the four map fragments were pieced together. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's true. But before that, we have to wait for news from the Golden Flame auction house. Between the two, the Tears of Frigid Flame was still the most important. Just as Xiren had expected, Gao Hanshun and the other three didn't leave after leaving the auction house. They did plan to make a long-term plan before making a move, but before that, they had to know where Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three lived. The entire Punglai Island was very large. If they were to search for them one by one, it would be too unrealistic. However, they waited until the cultivators who participated in the auction had left, but they didn't see any trace of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Do they know that we're going to find trouble with them? So they're avoiding us and thinking of ways to escape? After Lu Jiangang confirmed that there was no one else in the auction house, he couldn't help but frown. This was really troublesome. I think so. Gui Jun's expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect that he would end up with nothing. With their cultivation, they are no match for us at all, so they can only hide from us. Of course, how are we going to find them? Gao Hanchuan's face darkened. Forget it. Let's go back first. If they're deliberately avoiding us, there's nothing we can do. But as long as they're still on Penglai Island, we'll definitely find them. After today's incident, many people must have noticed them. Plus, they're related to the Golden Flame auction house. It shouldn't be too difficult for us to find them. Chapter 3266. With the perfect end of the auction, Manager Jean immediately went to find Elder D. No matter how unwilling he was to face Elder D, there was no point in not reporting the truth. Elder D, today's probing plan failed. Manager Jean lowered his head. I originally planned to test if D. Bei and the others were interested in the Tears of Frosty Flame, but Manager Jean's appearance ruined this plan. During the entire auction, D. Bei and the others did not win anything. Elder D glanced at Manager Jean indifferently and nodded. I understand. Seeing that Elder D did not have any reaction, Manager Jean could not help but be surprised. He thought that Elder D would scold him to his face. Then I'll go look for them later and test their strength? Manager Jean asked tentatively. No need. Manager Jean was stunned and did not seem to react. He could not help but ask again, Elder D, are you saying that I don't need to go? There's no need to continue with this plan. You can leave. I want to be alone. Elder D waved his hand. There was a hint of exhaustion in his expression. Ever since he returned from chatting with D. Yujue, his mood was very low. Seeing the young master in so much pain and not being able to do anything to help, this feeling was also very painful. If he could not find the young master, the hope of finding him in the future would become lower and lower. The problem with his physique was very likely to take the young master's life. All these years, he had always been very clear about the pain of D. Yujue and the others. If this continued, he really did not know what kind of scene it would be. He was afraid that no one in the family would be able to accept it. It was a pity that he had stayed on Penglai Island for so many years and could not find any news. He was really too useless. Manager Jean looked at Elder D, who was obviously not interested in talking to him. He was secretly surprised and could not help but let out a sigh of relief. This way, he could also explain to Manager Jean. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others returned to the inn, they stayed in the room and did not go anywhere because they were waiting for Manager Jin's arrival. If they guessed correctly, Manager Jean should be coming to find them soon. After all, this was the reason why the latter took out the Tears of Frosty Flame to auction. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not receive any news in the inn for a few days. They immediately felt that the situation was a little strange. It's been 3 days, and there's still no news from the Golden Flame auction house. Could something have happened? Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but frown. No matter what the reason was, 3 days was enough time for the other party to find them. Di Beichen's expression was somewhat complicated. Could it be that our judgment was wrong? That shouldn't be. Indeed. In the end, the Golden Flame auction house took back the Tears of Frosty Flame. It doesn't make sense at all. Di Beichen's face darkened. But if we're right, how could they have not made any moves? Chapter 3267. As time passed, the mood of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three became heavier and heavier. At this point, they naturally knew that the Golden Flame auction house would not come looking for them. Otherwise, it would be impossible for there to be no news for so long. Do you think it's possible that Manager Jean and Manager Qin have already reached an agreement, so they canceled this plan? When Xiren voiced out his guess, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and there was some uncertainty in her expression. If an agreement is really reached, then Steward Qin should inform us. Perhaps Steward Qin is still unwilling to reveal our identities, so he waited for us to return before discussing in detail. Shangguan Yingying said. Di Beichen shook his head and said in a low voice, No, If Steward Sheen and Manager Jean could really reach an agreement, they would have already reached an agreement before. How could such a storm happen? With Steward Sheen's personality, once he obtains the Tears of Cold Flame, he will definitely inform us as soon as possible. Even if he doesn't come personally, he can find someone else to inform us. He was very clear about Steward Sheen's curiosity and dedication to Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy. As long as it was successful, he would definitely want to talk about this business with Bailey Hongzhuang as soon as possible, and not have any news like now. Doesn't that mean we don't have any hope at all? Xiren's face paled. Compared to the expectations they had when they came, the current situation had given them a huge blow. If it really doesn't work, we'll take the initiative to look for the Golden Flame auction house. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said, her delicate little face filled with determination. No matter what, at least we can know the other party's conditions. It's better than guessing here. This was their only hope. If they couldn't get the Tears of Cold Flame, they wouldn't be able to return to the magic refining tower. In fact, she had already made all the preparations. If this still didn't work, then they could only snatch it. In order to transform Di Beichen's physique, they were willing to do anything. No matter what method they used, as long as they could achieve their goal, they would not hesitate. Shangguan Yingying nodded. Hongzhuang is right. Why don't we go to the Golden Flame auction house and ask for a Tears of Frigid Heat? No matter what the conditions are, as long as we can do it, it's fine. What I'm afraid of is that no matter what conditions we offer, they won't agree. When Xiren sighed, he could faintly feel that the Tears of Frigid Flame would be of great use to the Golden Flame auction house. If the Golden Flame auction house didn't value them, then all their efforts would be for naught. For a time, everyone's mood became heavier. They had originally planned to look for Gao Hanchuan's group after the matter of the Tears of Frigid Flame was settled. Unfortunately, there had been no news of the Tears of Frigid Flame. Therefore, they had no interest in Gao Hanchuan's group. At the same time, Gao Hanchuan's group was constantly looking for Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. Now that the grand auction had ended, many cultivators on Penglai Island had left. Therefore, it was much easier to find them than before. Chapter 3268. Where did these 4 fellows run off to? Lu Jiangang frowned. We've been looking for them for so long, but we haven't seen any trace of them. Could they have left already? Gui Jun shook his head. That shouldn't be possible. Big Brother has been keeping an eye on the pier and didn't see any trace of them leaving. I think they must still be on Penglai Island, but we haven't found them yet. We've already searched the entire Penglai Island, but unfortunately, we can't search room by room. Could it be that they've been staying in their rooms the whole time? Lu Jiangong's eyes lit up as he voiced out his doubts. If that was the case, he felt that the 4 of them were too strange. That is possible. Gui Jun pondered and said, could it be that they know that we're looking for them, so they're hiding? Now, that Mo, Xingyu, and the rest have left Penglai Island, and I've seen the recent movements of the Golden Flame auction house. They don't seem to have any contact with them. In that case, they basically don't have any backing. It's very easy for us to take action against them. Lu Jiangang was a little anxious. They finally found a good opportunity, and if they let Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest slip away, they didn't know when they would meet them again. Forget it. Don't be anxious. Let's continue looking. They can't possibly stay in there forever. Gui Jun sighed. They had no other choice but to search for a needle in a haystack. On this day, someone knocked on the door of Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest's room. Knock, knock. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest couldn't help but look at each other. Their eyes lit up. Could it be that the people from the Golden Flame auction house were looking for them? However, when the door opened, they didn't see anyone from the Golden Flame auction house but a waiter from the inn. When the waiter saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest looking at him, his eyes flashed with surprise. He then said, "Young master, there's a young master downstairs looking for you." Di Beichen listened to the waiter's words, and his handsome and elegant face revealed a trace of surprise. "Looking for me?" The waiter nodded. "It's the young master that you invited to drink with you that day. Do you still remember him?" It turns out to be him. Di Beichen suddenly understood and nodded. "I got it. After the attendant left, Di Beichen turned around and exchanged glances with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. He really didn't expect Di Yujue to come looking for him. Could he be here on behalf of the Golden Flame Auction House? When Xiren asked immediately. I don't know, but I think that's probably not the reason. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. If they're here to discuss a deal with us, the Golden Flame Auction House only needs to send Manager Jean. I'm afraid they don't need someone with a higher status to come here personally. Bei-chun, go take a look first. It's always good to get some information. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. You're close friends, aren't you? Even though this fate came out of nowhere, it wasn't a bad thing. Then I'll go down first. Di Beichen stroked Bailey Hongzhuang's soft hair, and his eyes were full of affection. Go ahead. Chapter 3269. Hongzhuang. Don't you think that if Beichen were to ask that person for the medicine, his chances of success would be much higher? Shang Guanying couldn't help but speak up. She had wanted to say this earlier. Since their hopes were already slim, then Di Beichen's friend was their biggest hope. Even Steward Jean couldn't make a decision about the tears of glacial flame. This person's status was higher than Steward Jin's, so he should be able to make a decision. At the very least, there was a glimmer of hope. However, just as she was about to speak, she was stopped by Xiren, so she didn't say anything. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Actually, I think so too. Then why didn't you remind Beichen just now? This is our only hope. Shang Guanying looked puzzled. This was related to Di Beichen's life. Beichen should know this better than we do. He doesn't want their relationship to have an additional layer of benefits. Once he asks for help, then this simple friendship will no longer be pure. Beichen has his own ideas on what to do. If we force this idea on him, it will only put pressure on him. A faint smile appeared on her delicate face. She was as elegant and indifferent as a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water, but revealed a sense of wisdom and gentleness. When Xiren quietly gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up, the more time he spent with Bailey Hongzhuang, the more he understood why Di Beichen, who had never been tempted by women, was so affectionate towards Bailey Hongzhuang. In fact, Bailey Hongzhuang was an extraordinary and considerate woman. It was really rare to see someone who could bear to be unfaithful to her. Beichen is under much more pressure than we are because of the tears of glacial flame. These days, I haven't seen him reveal a true smile. Since he can now chat with a confidant, that's great. Xiren's lips curled into a faint smile. This brother of his had been suppressing many things in his heart and was unwilling to say them out loud. These days, they had been anxious about the tears of glacial flame, but Di Beichen was definitely the one who suffered the most. Seeing Xiren and Bailey Hongzhuang's tacit understanding, Shang Guanying couldn't help but sigh. Speaking of which, her impetuous personality was really slow in this aspect. When Di Beichen went downstairs, he was brought to the private room by the waiter. He saw that Di Yujue had already ordered a table of dishes and was waiting for him. Little brother, you're here. Seeing Di Beichen appear, Di Yujue's face quickly revealed a smile. He immediately waved to Di Beichen sit. After Di Beichen saw Di Yujue, his mood obviously improved a lot. The heaviness that had been suppressed in his heart for the past few days also quietly dissipated. I'm here to drink with you today. Di Yujue laughed. You should be free, right? Di Beichen nodded. Of course. I just didn't expect that a busy person like you would have time to drink with me. Hearing this, Di Yujue chuckled and said, I'm going to leave Penglai Island soon. I don't know when we'll meet again, so I came to drink with you before I leave. Chapter 3270. It had been a long time since he had met a young man that he was comfortable with. Since he had met a fated person, it would be a pity if they never met again. Thus, he might as well drink to his heart's content before leaving. This time, his trip to the outside world was of great importance. If this news was true, then everything would be fine. If it was all for naught, then the situation would be even worse. I see. D. Baichan's eyes flashed with understanding. He had only just met D. Yujue. He did not expect the latter to leave so soon. However, all good things must come to an end. It was already good that they were fated to meet each other. Since you are leaving soon, then I will definitely drink to my heart's content with you today. Seeing that D. Baichan did not ask about the reason for his departure and where he was going, D. Yujue's eyes revealed a trace of admiration. Perhaps the reason why he and D. Baichan could get along so well was also related to D. Baichan's character of never asking about details. That's undoubtedly the best. D. Yujue picked up his wine cup. Let me toast you. The two drank to their heart's content and chatted about everything. However, they rarely talked about themselves. However, this did not hinder their conversation. On the contrary, the two of them chatted happily. However, during this process, both of them knew that the other was not in a good mood. Both of them were somewhat depressed and heavy. By the way, did you get any treasures at the auction this time? D. Yujue smiled at D. Baichan and asked. Hearing this, D. Baichan shook his head. I didn't bid for anything. The only thing I wanted to bid for has not been bought yet. Regarding this, he really felt helpless. Thinking about how Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two were worried about him, he felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Speaking of which, the reason why they were like this was all because of him. D. Baichan also knew in his heart that if they wanted to get the tears of frigid flame, they would most likely have to start with D. Yujue. However, when he came to find D. Yujue, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two were silent about it. How could he not understand the deep meaning behind this? Thinking about how Bailey Hongzhuang might become once he fell into eternal sleep, D. Baichan's heart constantly throbbed with pain. Therefore, he had no choice but to be selfish. For his beloved Hongzhuang, even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he had to work hard. In fact, death was not scary to him. Leaving Hongzhuang was the scariest thing. It was a pain that he could not bear. The tears of frigid flame. D. Baichan smiled slightly, then sighed and said, the bidding for the tears of frigid flame in this auction was really too intense. I didn't even have the chance to intervene. Following D. Baichan's words, Yujue also understood. I also heard about this matter. It caused quite a stir. Even a few days after the auction ended, there were still many people lamenting about this matter. However, what do you want the tears of frigid flame for? At this moment, D. Yujue couldn't help but think of what D. Lao had said to him before. D. Lao felt that D. Baichan was very likely the person they were looking for. Although he could see through D. Baichan's disguise, he couldn't see D. Baichan's true appearance. Regarding this, he couldn't make a judgment. Chapter 3271. D. Yujue was well aware of the effects of the tears of frigid frost. Normal cultivators wouldn't need the tears of frigid frost at all. Could it be that D. Baichan was the person they were looking for? However, seeing that D. Baichan was safe and sound and that his aura had reached the 5th level of the Purple Realm, D. Yujue couldn't help but dismiss this idea. This was simply impossible. Even the people in their family couldn't do this, so how could the outside world do it? My wife is an alchemist. D. Baichan smiled faintly. She usually likes to study some special medicinal herbs. However, she is very talented in this area and has always been called a genius alchemist. According to D. Baichan's wishes, he didn't want to lie to D. Yujue. However, his physique was really a big weakness. Moreover, they didn't know the reason why the Golden Flame auction house was collecting the tears of frigid frost, so he couldn't do anything. Currently, the safest explanation was the one they had thought of before. Regarding this, he could only apologize to D. Yujue. Hearing D. Baichan's words, D. Yujue finally understood. He had also seen many alchemists with strong alchemy skills, especially some alchemists who liked to innovate. Usually, they would always think of combining some herbs to make special pills. It was also because of the existence of these alchemists who liked to research and were full of creativity that alchemy could continue to develop. Towards this kind of alchemist, he was also very respectful. After all, there weren't many people who could be so creative. Even if they were alchemists, most alchemists could only refine medicinal pills according to the recipe. They didn't even have the idea of creating their own. I see. D. Yujue chuckled. Is your wife the one who was sitting next to you when we met last time? Although Bailey Hongzhuang was dressed as a man, D. Yujue could tell at a glance that she was a woman. Seeing that D. Yujue saw through all his disguises, D. Beichun didn't find it strange. He immediately smiled and nodded. Yes, she is my wife. I didn't expect you to be married at such a young age. That's pretty good. D. Yujue drank a glass of wine. Most of the cultivators on Penglai Island would get married very late. After all, when they were in the outside world, they would have spent all their time on cultivation. Not to mention, it was not easy to find a partner who was as strong as them. Now that he thought about it, he understood that D. Beichun's group of 4 were probably 2 pairs of partners. This was very interesting. Actually, my wife and I just got married not long ago. After that, we came to Penglai Island and found that there were many strong people on Penglai Island. We were really frogs in a well before. Almost everyone will have this feeling when they come to Penglai Island for the first time. However, even in Penglai Island, we're just frogs in a well. D. Yujue shook his head. However, people walk to a higher place. It is normal to walk from a small place to a big platform. Listening to D. Yujue's words, D. Beichun couldn't help but frown. He felt that D. Yujue seemed to be implying something. However, seeing that D. Yujue didn't intend to continue talking about this point, D. Beichun stopped asking. Chapter 3272. Is your wife disappointed that she wasn't able to win back the tears of frigid flame? D. Yujue stared at D. Beichun and slowly asked. Hearing this, D. Beichun couldn't help but think of Bailey Hongzhuang's worried look recently. He couldn't help but nod and said, Indeed, she has been a little depressed recently. Ever since the problem with his physique exploded, Bailey Hongzhuang had been very depressed, and the smile on her face was no longer the same as before. Thinking back to when he and Bailey Hongzhuang walked step by step from Fengbo country to the big platform, no matter what kind of problem they encountered, Bailey Hongzhuang was always full of confidence, and there was never a trace of despair on her face. When the boat reaches the bridge head, everything will be fine. There's always a way out. These were the beliefs that Bailey Hongzhuang had always firmly believed in. However, the problem with his physique was a heavy blow to Bailey Hongzhuang, causing Bailey Hongzhuang's mood to be extremely heavy recently. Seeing D. Beichun's worried look, D. Yujue's eyes flashed with a light, and the corner of his lips curled up. He said, I didn't expect you to be such a righteous person. You value your wife so much. Most cultivators only cared about their own interests, and there weren't many who wholeheartedly thought about their partner. After all, just increasing one's cultivation required a lot of time, and this was also the reason why many people didn't have a partner. D. Beichun smiled faintly. I made a fool of myself, but my wife loves me deeply, so it's only right for me to treat her like this. Ha! D. Yujue laughed brightly. Seeing you like this, it reminds me of me 20 years ago. It seems that we are indeed the same kind of people. You love your wife as much as you love your life. Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Thinking back, he and his wife were also stuck together like glue and were very loving. If that incident hadn't happened, he and his wife would still be the same as 20 years ago. Unfortunately, his wife didn't want to see him at all. D. Yujue's reaction was clearly beyond D. Beichun's expectations. He didn't expect D. Yujue to react the same way as him. The smile on his face immediately brightened. I think that's what every man should do. D. Yujue nodded slightly. That's right. Those guys don't understand the true joy in this. If they only focus on cultivation, won't it be boring in the end? Speaking of which, I just heard a piece of news. It seems that your surname is D. Hearing this, D. Beichun was slightly startled. He was no stranger to this question. Back when he was on the Emerald Island, The old man had also asked him the same question. However, ever since he was young, he had never felt that there was anything wrong with the surname D. On the contrary, after he came to Panglai Island, everyone seemed to have some doubts about his surname. Not bad. Speaking of which, it's really a coincidence that my surname is also D. Duju's smile widened. Perhaps it's the will of the heavens. On Panglai Island, there are very few people with the surname D. D. Baichen's eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. Your surname is also D? Duju nodded. That's right. To be honest, I haven't met anyone with the surname D since I was young. What a coincidence. D. Baichen chuckled. As for his surname, D. Baichen also knew the origin of it. Chapter 3273. With Cetian's eyesight, he could tell at a glance that this jade pendant was not ordinary. It was definitely a precious item, and on this jade pendant was a single word, D. After seeing this jade pendant, Cetian thought for a long time. He felt that this was the only keepsake D. Baichen had, and it was very likely to represent D. Baichen's identity. As for the meaning of the word D, Cetian couldn't figure it out in a short time. In the end, after thinking about it, he felt that it was very likely to be a surname. Therefore, he dismissed the idea of having D. Baichen use the surname Cetian and named him D. Baichen. In fact, until now, neither Cetian nor D. Baichen knew the true meaning of the word D. However, D. Baichen felt that using it as a surname was quite good. This was the only connection between him and his birth parents. That's why I said that everything is fate. Dujua laughed loudly. For this fate, we must drink. All right. D. Baichen raised his wine cup. The two clinked their cups and immediately drank the wine in one gulp. Their faces were filled with joy. In this vast sea of people, it was very difficult to meet someone who was extremely congenial with him. Moreover, the other party had so many characteristics that were similar to him. It was really too much fate. Little brother, since you and I are so fated, then I'll give you a portion of these tears of frostfire. It's also to make your wife happy. Dujua was obviously in a very good mood. He immediately decided to give a portion of these tears of frostfire to D. Baichen. Hearing Dujua's words, D. Baichen couldn't help but be stunned. He stared blankly at Dujua. This surprise was really too big, and for a moment, he couldn't come back to his senses. Previously, he had been thinking about how to ask Dujua for a portion of the tears of frosty flame, but he had never thought of how to ask. Furthermore, there was nothing he could take out in exchange. However, in order to be able to continue being together with Hong Zhuang, even if he had to be thick-skinned and shameless, he had to get the tears of Frosty back. However, before he could even open his mouth, Dujua had already decided to give him the tears of frigid flame. How could he not be shocked? For me? D. Baichen couldn't help but raise his voice. His handsome face couldn't hide the astonishment and surprise. Looking at D. Baichen's expression, Dujua's smile widened. That's right. I'll give it to you as long as you and your wife are happy. He owed his wife too much over the years, but unfortunately, he couldn't make up for it even if he wanted to. Now that he and D. Baichen were so fated, he naturally didn't want D. Baichen to be like him, only able to see his wife unhappy. Although the tears of frostfire were very important to them, they had collected quite a lot over the years. Giving away a portion wasn't a problem. Most importantly, it was rare for him to meet such a fated person. After receiving Dujua's confirmation, D. Baichen couldn't help but feel a trace of ecstasy. Their biggest problem had been solved just like that. How could he not be happy? Young Master D, thank you so much. D. Baichen couldn't help but stand up. The joy on his face couldn't be concealed. Perhaps this wasn't a big deal to Dujua, but it was equivalent to saving his life. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.